All right, what's going on? Drive time on a Monday afternoon, about 15 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. A little chilly, about 36 degrees, but the sun is shining today. Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a great weekend, and as it is, every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. That's Porter Larson behind the glass to get you through your Monday afternoon. Get you through your commute home on this Monday afternoon after a jam-packed sports weekend. We have the matchup for Super Bowl 59 at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. It is the Chiefs and the Eagles, a rematch of Super Bowl 57. The opening line is Kansas City, a slight favorite. 1.5 is the number. And the over-under is 49.5. So we'll get to that as Kansas City took care of the Buffalo Bills once again, the long-suffering Buffalo Bills, if you know the history of that franchise. And after what looked like it could be a bit of a battle early on, Philly just ran away from Washington. 55-23, they ran the ball at will. Jalen Hurts was a little bit better through the air, and that was a bloodbath, man. And I thought it would be a little bit closer, but the one game, I'll be honest, I was hoping to not see was Philly and Kansas City. I just thought the storyline of a rookie quarterback in the Super Bowl or Josh Allen finally getting over the hump would have been a little bit more exciting, but two very deserving teams. And Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, they do it once again. You know, on Friday's show, I said before we signed off, we gave you our picks. I said I'll take Philly in a close one. Well, it wasn't close, but Philly won. And then I said I just feel like it's Josh's time. But I fully anticipated sitting on the couch on Sunday afternoon, shaking my head going, you idiot, what are you doing? At some point, just don't pick against them. They've kind of risen to that level. So we'll get to that game on the show today with Ben Solak from ESPN. It's been a rough 24 hours for our guy, Ben, so we're going to bring him in and try to heal the wounds a little bit, but we'll recap the weekend behind us and look ahead to Super Bowl 59 coming up in 2 weeks-ish from right now. So Ben will drop by right off the bat today. Tom Haberstroh, NBA Daily Assist style. Utah Jazz lost to the Grizzlies over the weekend. It's their fifth straight loss. They have the Milwaukee Bucks in town tonight. The trade deadline is 10 days away. Jazz have the second worst record in the NBA. We'll do some pro basketball on the show today with Tom Stevenson Sylvester. He stops by as well to talk some college and some pro football. We do have some breaking news right off the top of the show. The Heat have suspended Jimmy Butler indefinitely. 10 days away from the trade deadline. Some interesting news. That just came down. And then the voice himself, Bill Riley, stops by the program today. Utah men's basketball, after winning 3 straight Big 12 games, they've dropped back-to-back games now to Houston on the road and to Baylor at home. The Utah women went down to Provo and got another win. Yana Neepkins is on fire. Back-to-back wins for the Utah women against Kansas, against BYU. We'll do some college basketball and some college football with Riles today. So it's Ben Solak, it's Tom Haberstroh, it's Stevenson Sylvester, it's Bill Riley, it's me, Spence Checketts. Hello, how are you? Happy Monday. It's that guy, Porter Larson, producing the show. I said it to you, man. I said I'm taking Josh Allen, I'm taking the Buffalo Bills, but I fully anticipate sitting on my couch on Sunday night going, what are you doing? And Bills get the ball back, a few minutes left, 3 timeouts, they're down 3. I'm like, all right, at the very least, go tie the game. Sent it to overtime. Couldn't even get that done. Feel for our guy, Dalton Kincaid, but Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, man, they have elevated themselves into a very, very rare stratified air.
Yeah, obviously, no one's ever done the three-peat. So if they were to get to that level, we have to start talking about them in a class of their own, right? And it just is a continuation of what we've seen for the last half decade, almost a decade now, between Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. The synergy those guys have, it gives a team so much confidence, Spence, that when it goes back and forth on against a really good team in January, they don't panic. They don't fall into what happens to a lot of teams, that it starts to snowball and you see the momentum. You see the guys who haven't been there before, even though they're perfectly capable. You saw it with the Commanders. They don't necessarily have it in the big moments, and again, Kansas City comes out on top. The weekend kind of played out how I thought it would, outside of the absolute blowout on the NFC side. The Eagles look really good. Saquon, man, that's something special, and he's having a really special run as well. Makes the Eagles seem a little unfair. You mentioned last week, Spence, that you feel like the AFC title game may feel like a kind of the winner goes on to win. I don't know if I feel that way now, even though I did kind of agree with you last week.
Yeah, on paper, Howie Roseman has built an incredible roster for Philly, and we'll see what happens. A couple weeks away, of course, we'll have a lot of NFL guests between now and then to preview Super Bowl 59. We have one coming your way in just a few minutes. His name is Ben Solak from ESPN. But the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. It's time for your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text WINNER right now to 508-777-1000. That's WINNER to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from ESPN 700 before Ben Solak stops by on a Monday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends and your good friends, too, at Standard Restaurant Supply, your one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. It is time now for your opening tip. So Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, and the Kansas City Chiefs get it done, winning the AFC Championship once again over the Buffalo Bills, a rematch of the conference championship game from a few years ago. And this was, as you guys have heard everybody talk about since it went down, just your classic Patrick Mahomes, classic Andy Reid, Steve Spagnuolo performance, where over the past couple of years, it has been fun to watch Patrick Mahomes evolve into kind of this cerebral guy as opposed to the dude who was going to beat you over the top with Tyreek Hill every single time, or a peak, Travis Kelce back when that offense started really showing shades and reminiscent of like the greatest show on turf, some of the funnest offensive football I've ever seen. That's not who they are now, and it doesn't matter because they find a way to win even when it doesn't look like they're going to. A lot of narratives today about who Josh Allen is, who the Buffalo Bills are, and what's next for them. Just like last week after Lamar Jackson lost once again, as the media does their thing where it's like, can this quarterback ever rise up and beat the greatest quarterback to at least grab a Super Bowl or two? Peyton Manning, I think, lost his first 6 games to Tom Brady before he kind of finally broke through. But, it is time to really acknowledge that Patrick Mahomes is Tiger Woods on Sunday. He's, Michael Jordan is, to me, the best comp at this point because when Mike was young in Chicago, he set the NBA all-time single-game scoring mark against the Boston Celtics in the Garden, scoring 63, but they lost that game. And Michael Jordan, as a young player, overwhelmed you with his athleticism, overwhelmed you with his combination of quickness, athleticism, athletic ability. He could jump out of the gym. And as Michael got older, he mastered the fadeaway jump shot. He mastered the post game. You could throw it to him on the block, and that became unstoppable. And when he had a combination of clearly the cerebral approach where he could outthink you, combined with his ability to outwork everybody, because that's what he did, and then you add in the fact that he still was athletic when he needed to be, he became impossible. And a lot of parallels today about the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen and teams that went up against Mike in the 90s. And, of course, we are uniquely qualified to discuss this topic here in Salt Lake City, and certainly on this radio show where my experience in pro basketball in the 90s was steeped in 2 teams. One was the Utah Jazz, and the other was the New York Knicks. And Michael Jordan took rings off all of their fingers over and over and over. Now, the one pushback I'll offer. So, and I hate to bring this up. This is salt in the wounds for Jazz fans. But, hey, right now, as a Jazz fan, all you have is salt in your wounds. So it's not like I'm making it worse. I'll push back on the Jazz Bills stuff, like is Josh Allen, Karl Malone, right? Because the one difference here, and, if you remember this, in 1998, the Jazz were the best team in pro basketball. They were. I didn't think they were in 97. 96, 97, it was still Chicago. But 97, 98, I think most people who covered the league, most people who were in the league, most people who followed the league said, okay, this is Jerry Sloan's time. This is John Stockton's time. This is Karl Malone's year. This is Larry Miller's chance to be an owner who also is a champion. 97, 98 was the year. But the other side story that most people don't fully either understand or talk about is behind the scenes with the Jazz. It wasn't just the year. It better be this year. Because in 1998, John Stockton was 36 years old. Karl Malone was 35. It wasn't just we're the best team in pro basketball. It was if we don't do this now, we may never do it. And that's ultimately what happened. Because, as we all remember, we are the home of the highest rated basketball game in the history of the world. We are the home of the one basketball game that was watched by more people around the world than any other game, and that was Michael Jordan's last game here in 1998. Well, we all remember he steals the ball from Karl, comes back, crossover, push off whatever camp you're in, knocks down the jump shot over Brian Russell, and boom, Chicago wins, and it's over. And I was in the building. I was actually standing next to Stuart Scott, non sequitur. Stuart, in a very non-professional media manner, because he was a Carolina guy, went nuts when Jordan hit his shot. But game over, buzzer sounded, and I can tell you the feel in that building with the front office, the coaches, and the players was, I don't know that we'll ever have that chance again with this group because John and Karl had aged a little bit. They were older, like I said, 36, 35. And sure enough, that was the case. John gets hurt. He gets a little bit older. Karl takes off. He goes to Los Angeles. And that was the pinnacle of basically 15 years of roster construction, roster tinkering, Jerry growing as a coach, John and Karl growing together, trying to add piece by piece. They get Hornacek. They finally have a center with Ostertag, who did have a pulse and at times played really well. They had good pieces and depth coming off the bench. They had good wing defenders in Brian Russell and Shannon Anderson. It felt like everything was there for them to get it done at that point. But if they didn't get it done that year, it did feel like they were never going to get it done. Now, Josh Allen's 28 years old. And I feel the same way about Josh Allen as I feel about Lamar Jackson, as I felt once upon a time about Aaron Rodgers before our guy lost the plot. They're too good not to get one, I think. They're too good not to get this done. Now, Scott Mitchell, who joins us on the show often, talks about Dan Marino as being the best quarterback he ever saw play, and we know that Dan never got one. And as long as Mahomes and Andy Reid are in front of you, I guess you have to deal with what Gary Payton dealt with, what Sean Kemp dealt with what Charles Barkley dealt with what Patrick Ewing dealt with, Reggie Miller. I could keep going, of course, John and Karl, that every time the Pacers or the Knicks or the Sonics or the Suns or the Jazz thought, this is our year, it always went the other way. Because when the moment was, the bigger the moment became, and this is where I do think the Jordan-Mahomes analogy lands, the bigger the moment was, the bigger it became, the bigger he showed up every single time. Did he make every shot? No, because that's not basketball. But in the postseason, it's why anybody who really knows the tone and tenor of the league will not entertain the whole LeBron's the greatest of all time. He'll probably have all the records. He's played longer than whatever, and he's got a complete skill set, all those things. It's Jordan, and it's the period at the end of the sentence. If you're on the other side, you and I can't even have a conversation because every time the moment presented itself, Mike was there to meet the moment. And that's who Mahomes has become. That's who Andy Reid has become. And shame on me for picking against him because, like I said on Friday, when I said I fully anticipate sitting there on Sunday afternoon shaking my head, it's exactly what I was doing. All right, coming up on the other side, Ben Solak, ESPN. We're going to break down what we just saw. We're going to preview the Super Bowl. Move over to Tom Haberstroh, Stevenson, Sylvester, and Bill Riley on a Monday. Keep it here on ESPN 700. Bowl 57. Your early line is KC a slight favorite. Let's break it down, though. Our next guest joins us from time to time, and he's always good to give us time because he's very busy now because he's very famous. His name is Ben Solak from ESPN on a Monday. Ben, happy Monday, buddy. How are we doing?
Thank you, Spence. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. So I don't have to tell you that the internet is where cowards go to feel brave, correct?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Okay, good. Because I'll just tell you, I watched the video that you posted, and I thought,
yeah.
no, I'm just saying, I thought it made a ton of sense. I'm not sure why you're getting as much heat as you're getting, but as somebody, and I'm speaking for myself, who's been, in the crosshairs of like every fan base possible around here, and BYU fans trying to get me canceled for years online. I just wanted to make sure that you're hanging in, you're doing all right.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It's what it is. Not the first time I've had a take, and then people get upset about it. Won't be the last. Part of the job. The good news is that they send you to the Super Bowl for free. The bad news is people get mad at you on the internet. It's just like any other job. It's got good, it's got its bad. It's no biggie.
Fair enough. So for the people out there that don't live online, first, congratulations to you. Second of all, let's walk people through what went down. You were breaking down with a piece of video that I think you do as well as anybody out there, why Josh Allen on that final throw that was miraculous that he got it to former Dalton Kincaid. You thought he had a better look to go to Khalil Shakir. So let's hear about it.
Yeah, the Bills walk out empty, right? They have 4 receivers to the left, 1 receiver to the right. And then they do something that they do a lot on 4th and medium, 3rd and medium. They motion Khalil Shakir into the backfield, and they snap it while he's moving through the backfield. And most teams, when they snap with a guy moving through the backfield, that guy keeps running that direction. But the Bills like to have him slam on the brakes and then run back the way that he came. And then they'll throw it to him in the flat, and he usually has a lot of space to create yards after the catch. They did it against the Chiefs last year on a 4th and 3 right around midfield, converted and get the drive going and eventually scored. So it's a common look for them. Allen has the ability to go to Shakir right then and there, right? He's the first read, he's the first option. Or he can try to read out the rest of the passing concept, and he gets zone coverage. It's not the best look for that motion, and so he decides not to throw it to Shakir. And right as he makes that choice, he's got 2 free rushers coming down the pipe at him, right? So he makes a choice. I'm not throwing this to Shakir. I'm going to try to create something out to my right, create something in space. He makes the first 2 rushers miss. There's a 3rd guy who's there, turns it back to the inside. Now you have to heave up a prayer ball, almost caught by Dalton Kincaid. And so Allen made an incredible throw and a high difficulty physical play. He probably could have made another high-difficulty physical play and made that throw to Shakir in space. You're throwing the ball quite far behind the line of scrimmage. There's a long way to go for the first down. But, again, the Bills have done this on 4th and 3 multiple times over the last season. It's a designer play from Joe Brady. So I thought, yeah, you could have, I think, a different quarterback, a quarterback maybe in less big of a moment with less Mahomes fear on his back, playing in Kansas City, trying to get to the Super Bowl. Maybe he would have just trusted the structure of the play a little bit more. Maybe he would have just panicked a little bit more, just thrown it to some other guy. You solve this problem for me. Allen tried to put the team on his back. Very nearly did. Pretty much should have, right? Dalton Kincaid should have caught the ball. But it is interesting to think about that play designed to go to Shakir. What would have happened if the pass went to him? That's all.
And entirely fair. And you back it up with video. I think it was Ryan Fitzpatrick who kind of went at you and talked about the the urgency of that moment when you have 2 free rushers kind of going at you. And, you just kind of do what you can to try to make a play. What's your reaction to kind of that portion of this conversation that KC had 2 free pass rushers that were beaten down on Josh pretty quickly?
No, Ryan's absolutely right. Ryan's point is like, you, Ben, have never been in a pocket and experienced those 2 free rushers. So you think Allen had time to make this decision? He had the physical ability to make this throw? I don't think he did. Fitz and I disagree, right? Fundamentally, it's one of those things where it's not like I said it was a certain coverage, then Fitz is like, no, actually, it's that coverage. And it's like, oh, shoot, like, you've seen it right, I'm not seeing it right. Fitz and I disagree about the amount of time Allen had and if he is physically capable of making that throw. Most people are going to agree with Fitz. Hey, Fitz had an 11-year career as an NFL quarterback. I don't fault him for that. I don't know. My job is to watch Josh Allen play. Didn't get to play. Wasn't born as big as Josh Allen, unfortunately. But my job is to watch Josh Allen play and try to consider what could have happened on some plays, what should have happened on other plays. And I try to do my job as well as I can. If you're like, hey, the NFL quarterback said it could have happened and it could have happened, all the more power to you. I don't know. I've watched Josh Allen make some really spectacular throws, including the throw he did make on that play. So I think the throw I'm asking to make is well within his physical capabilities. But it's a disagreement between 2 guys whose job it is to try to figure out how football should have gone. And Fitz does really good work, and I try to do really good work as well.
Fair enough. All right, moving on here. So my basketball life in the 90s specifically was steeped in 2 teams. One was the Utah Jazz, and the other was the New York Knicks. And the one guy they had in common that took rings off their fingers every single year, it seemed like, was Michael Jordan. What is the Patrick Mahomes analogy? I've heard it all day. Tiger on Sundays, Messi if you're a soccer fan. The Jordan one feels the Jordan one feels the most on point to me because the bigger the moment was with Mike, the bigger that his performance was, and he always seemed to get it done in the NBA Finals where he won all 6 times he was there. And the bigger the moment is for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, the bigger their answers are to the questions that are asked. What's the best Patrick Mahomes analogy that you've heard, or maybe you have one of your own?
I like the Jordan one, and it's tough for me. I don't have a great frame of reference because, firstly, I'm a younger guy, but then I grew up in like a football-only household, and so a lot of times the cross-sport analogies to me are based off just like my very skin-deep understanding of some of these players. I do think the Jordan one, where there's a sense of inevitability, there's a sense of this man equals championship, and the route to which he gets there may not look the way we always expect it to look, and he had these multiple errors of his career, but the guy just equals a championship. He was that caliber of player in those caliber of moments. I think that's probably the best sport-to-sport one that comes to mind. Playing Mahomes is like playing quicksand, right? I mean, it's like playing a black hole. Like, yeah, you can do stuff in the middle, but we don't know the end of the story, right? It's the inevitability of there's just a force that draws you in to a game that's halfway through the fourth quarter. That's a one-score game where you've gotten a little bit banged up, and they've gotten a little bit banged up, and you've gotten your stops, and they've gotten their stops, and you've gotten your lucky breaks. But Patrick Mahomes is just going to lean on you a little bit too much for a little bit too long, and eventually you're going to break, right? This Bills team, man, 3.5 minutes left, down by 3. The Bills, if you interviewed every single Buffalo Bill and you said, hey, if I give you 3.5 minutes left in the game, all 3 timeouts, you're down by 3, you have the ball, will you take that? They all would have said yes. They would have yes, they said yes. We can do it. We have the ball. We have control of the clock. We're going to go beat this team. And then they did it. And that's credit to the Chiefs defense, and obviously the Chiefs offense picks up the first down that's necessary. But that's what it feels like to play the Chiefs. You can even get kind of that situation that you were hoping for, right? We have a chance to go win the game as the clock expires, and yet still you just can't escape the pull of these guys. It's very challenging.
So you'll know this. Was Peyton 0-6 against Brady? Was that the number? He was 0-6 before he was able to break through?
I think so. I'll double check right now.
Yeah,
it was either 0-5 or 0-6.
Okay, yeah, something like that. So instead of making a cross-board analogy, maybe we can just stick with the NFL, because I need to kick the tires with you on where you're at with Josh now. I mean, I said on Friday, Ben, I'm riding with the Bills. I feel like it's Josh's time. Then I said I fully anticipate sitting on my couch Sunday evening, shaking my head going, you idiot, which is exactly what happened. Mm-hmm. But I have a hard time believing at 28 he's never going to be able to get it done. So today, where are you at simply with Josh Allen?
Yeah, so it was 6 straight, and absolutely. I really hope when I sit down with my daughter, I sit down with my kids, whatever, 20 years from now, I'm going to be able to look back at the history of NFL football and circle the Josh Allen MVP season and circle the Josh Allen Super Bowl victory and say, that is an accurate reflection of the quarterback that I watched. But the reality is that we just got the best Josh Allen season we've ever seen. It was the lowest interception rate in a season of his entire career. Not only was it his best season in terms of not taking sacks in his career, it's from a sack to pressure dropback ratio, it's probably the best season for avoiding sacks that we've ever seen. We just got the best Josh Allen we've ever seen, and Lamar's probably going to win MVP, and Josh isn't going to win a Super Bowl. And so it is my firm belief for Josh, and I said this about Lamar after he lost to Allen, my firm belief is that a quarterback this good is going to eventually win a Super Bowl, right? That if I understand anything about football, it's that the quarterback kind of sets a ceiling and your floor, and these guys set extremely high ceilings and extremely high floors. The problem is that 15 is just sitting on top of this conference right now. Mahomes and the Chiefs they feel like, again, that immovable object, that black hole, that inevitability. It's the sort of thing where the dam doesn't break until it does, right? You accumulate hits, and you try and you fail again and again and again. But at some point, Ravens last year had the home game. Bills this year were a better team on paper. At some point, somebody gets enough breaks to beat the Chiefs the way that Joe Burrow beat the Chiefs, and then the dam breaks, right? Joe Burrow beat the Chiefs in the playoffs in 2021. We are still talking about it 4 years later, right? Bengals haven't done anything really as a team since then. But once you get that once you get that medal around your chest, you ascend above the feeling of it. You say, okay, we know we can beat these guys in January football. So I believe Josh is going to win a Super Bowl. I really do. I believe Lamar's going to win a Super Bowl. I really do. I sure would like if it had already happened, because we're starting to get to our late 20s and, hits start to accumulate. But they're too good of quarterbacks. I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, and the other thing is you reference not just Mahomes being on top of the conversation, but Jordan late in his career, in his 30s, you're like, all right, he's going to go away at some point. Mahomes is 29. And ultimately, for teams to win NBA championships, when Mike was, in his heyday or at his prime, they had to wait for him to trade his basketball shoes for baseball cleats for 2 years, which allowed Olajuwon and the Rockets to go win a couple of championships. And both the Knicks and the Jazz blew it with their opportunity when Mike was, not playing basketball. Is it going to be something similar? Like if Mahomes is healthy every single year, he's only a year older than Josh. Are they going to have to wait for him to either get hurt or go away for a while, in your opinion?
I don't think so. I mean, that might end up being what happens, right? You end up getting a Gimpy Mahomes, right? Buccaneers and Chiefs Super Bowl when that game came. Like maybe that's what it ends up being. Again, like this year kind of should have been the year. They didn't have great pass protection off the left side. Kelsey is starting to really fall off in terms of his efficacy. The Chiefs are going to roll into next year with a lot of the same problems that they have this year. And so this is a beatable team. It is. We have to remember, in the NFL playoffs, we play best of one series, right? We don't play best of sevens. You think about the way that you can kind of accumulate some confidence. You can experiment and find some weaknesses in an NBA series, playing 7 games, in an MLB series, different pitchers, different looks. In the NFL, we play best of one. And so when the Chiefs beat the Bills like this, we say, all right, yeah, the Chiefs are never going to lose. Man, there's a lot of universes where the Chiefs lose this game, right? Calls go a different way on 4th and 1. The fourth, Dalton Kincaid catches the pass. We have to remember that even though we get that outcome, since it is a best of one series, it feels finite. It feels like 100% yes, 0% no, and that's not necessarily the case. And so I think they can beat the Chiefs without something drastic or dramatic happening to Mahomes. With that said, if something drastic or dramatic happens to Mahomes, yeah, you can bet the Bills and the Ravens are immediately going to shove every chip they have all in because that's the best window that they've had in quite some time.
Before we get to Commanders Eagles, I'm just going to ask you. I'm not. I never have been. I don't do the job as a blame the refs guy unless it's completely egregious. And it's really easy to say that because Travis Kelce is dating Taylor Swift, Roger Goodell wants the attention continue for his league. It's not like they need it. I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I'm not a wormhole guy either. But you see the 4th down that potentially Buffalo should have been rewarded a first down. And a lot of people, Ben, are simply just drawing the line. And I think it's kind of lazy. But Is there any meat on that bone, in your opinion?
No. I think that what people really underestimate, they underestimate 2 things, in my opinion. The first is that, man, if the league were rigging games, I promise you they would like the Bills to have attended the Super Bowl. With the way public sentiment is right now, with the excitement of getting kind of Josh Allen that Super Bowl win and contender to the Chiefs. Like, think about the amount of content we would manufacture if Allen finally knocked off the Mahomes and they went and they beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. There's a new king of the AFC, Allen, Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar. How do you rank them? Like, I promise you, from a contest perspective, like a 3-peat is cool, but it doesn't last nearly as long as a new champion Bills win their first Super Bowl ever as a franchise. So one, if we were rigging things, we'd be doing it the other way. The second thing is that's really hard to rig things, man. Like, you think it wouldn't have gotten out by now if the Chiefs were very clearly getting favorable calls intentionally? No. I think that the Chiefs play a lot of primetime games. And a lot of people watch those primetime games and see them much more than they see the Carolina Panthers play and the Chicago Bears play and the Minnesota Vikings play. And in those primetime games, the Chiefs, who have won 17 straight one-score games, it is an NFL record. Well, when you play 17 one-score games and you win them all, yeah, there's going to feel like an outsized number of calls that are benefiting you and you alone. So in one-score games, one play can make the difference. So we have a lot of televised games and a lot of one-score games. There's an availability bias here. More people have seen favorable calls go the Chiefs' way just because more people have watched the Chiefs than have watched any other team. So to me, there's no credence to it. But, yeah, I mean, anytime I get a call, I get a text from my mom, I get a text from my brother-in-law, I get a text from my cousin, I get a text from my buddies who I haven't talked to in 10 years because they all want to know what the NFL is up to rigging these games.
Couple of local questions for you. Andy Reid ties Don Shula, second most Super Bowls of all time. Should they win the Super Bowl? What's that conversation sound like? And I'm not like, hey, what's his legacy? But he's got to be on the short list and one of the best to ever do this job, yeah?
Absolutely. We just spent a lot of time talking about Josh and what it can look like for Josh. We got to remember how we talked about Andy in the early 2000s, right? With those Eagles teams, Andy can get it done. Andy's never going to be the guy in the postseason. His teams consistently fail. And now you watch him with the Chiefs. where, listen to those Bills players' quotes. They're running stuff we've never seen. They're walking out with designer packages we weren't prepared for. Think about all the Mahomes runs and the design runs they scored on. The Chiefs' ability in recent postseasons to walk out with just a couple of designer things on offense, a few things they installed just to beat you, just to make sure they get that fourth down, make sure they get that touchdown instead of a field goal. Reed has become one of the best postseason coaches of all time in terms of not just wins and appearances, but how he's adjusting week over week. They have such a deep bag of options because of his long experience. So absolutely, Reed's going to be up there, one of the best coaches of all time, certainly one of the most successful postseason coaches of all time. And he's a good story. He's a good cautionary tale that we should not use early career postseason success to define what a player's or a coach's career in the postseason is actually going to be.
What's fair to say about our guy Dalton Kincaid on that final throw? What's fair to say? Because I'm sure he's wearing it, man. Knowing that kid, I'm sure he's depressed.
Yeah, I think he said it extremely well himself when they asked him about it after the game. He said, sucks a lot, right? There's not much else to say. Oh, the ball this way and it's just having sucks a lot. And you can even see him when he misses the catch. Watching the film back this morning, not only does he miss it, when he sees the ball bounce past him, he does like a Looney Tunes cartoon, like his head snaps over to it. You can see his eyes pop out of his helmet. He like collapses on the ground. He couldn't believe it, right? Like he saw the ball in the air for ages. He was just so confident he was going to get it. It's a basket catch. It's away from your frame, but still it's the sort of catch you expect to make in that moment. Kincaid was a first-round pick for the Bills. They clearly wanted to have a tight end that could run the passing game through. We've seen that not just with Travis Kelce, but with recent guys like Trey McBride for the Cardinals, Brock Bowers for the Raiders. It just has not worked out for the Bills. Kincaid has not been a juicy enough guy with the ball in his hands. He's not been a consistent enough catcher of the football. They've kind of entered the spread the wealth passing game. So it's tricky, right? He's their starting tight end. He makes a couple good plays over the course of the season. But certainly he's, I think, underwhelmed relative to expectation. And then in this moment, sucks a lot. Like there's nothing to really say that contextualizes that play besides that was the worst thing that could have happened, and I feel terrible.
Moving over to Philly, Washington, let's just start with a macro question about a kid who we watched out here in the Pac-12 footprint before he went to LSU, and Jaden Daniels. And, the Commanders, 33 years between conference championship appearances and, the Dan Snyder years. I love the ESPN piece where he's like pissed that they're good. I mean,
so good.
I mean, there are very few things in sports that we can come to a consensus on. That might be the closest one that everybody is like, screw that dude. But I feel really happy for that fan base. What does year one with Jaden under center say to you about what could be next for that organization for a decade plus?
Extremely poised, extremely accurate, extremely smart, extremely tough. Like we were just checking boxes, man. And I remember when Stroud came into the postseason last year, and I said, dude, like you get a playoff game, like that's such a good experience for the guys just to like feel what postseason football is like. They win that game, they get to go on the road to Kansas City. Like, oh, this is just an excellent building block for a young player. With Jaden, you get 2 road playoff games and he wins them both, playing really excellent football the whole time. He didn't even need the learning curve, right? Oh, this is what postseason football is like. He kind of already walked in with some of that championship DNA in his blood. So checked every single box for you. Now, you want to get a little bit more serious about your offensive line, right? Which they played well this year, and they probably punched a little bit above their weight, but left tackle still a little bit of a question mark. The left guard position struggled against the Eagles. And they had their starter in left guard, right guard, where they had the backup. Obviously, the depth was really tested as well. And so you're going to have to get a little more serious about offensive line because even though you're going to be a quick passing team, you really want to protect Jaden, who's quite thin, from accumulating additional hits. He's going to accumulate some because of how much he runs, so you really want to be careful about not putting too many on the pile. And so I get pretty serious about offensive line. And then from a team like horizon perspective, when Adam Peters and Dan Quinn sat down, started planning out life with Jaden Daniels, April, May, June of this past year, they said, all right, 1-year horizon, if the guy hits, and then maybe we draft a wide receiver, maybe we trade back a little bit, maybe by year 3, we're signing big free agents. You accelerate the process. Right, you are calling T. Higgins' agent tomorrow, right? Best free agent that's available at wide receiver, and you're saying, all right, what's the price tag? Because if we can inundate Jaden Daniels with weapons, then we have the ability to really make a 3-year window here where he's extremely cheap relative to the market, but he's a franchise caliber quarterback, and we can take some earnest shots at winning this thing, right? Making a push in the NFC. NFC's not very strong. Spence, it really isn't, right? Lions losing coordinators. Eagles obviously played quite well this season, but Jalen Hurts is a bit of a question mark long term for them. So yeah, like you are in a position where you start shoving chips into the middle, and rightfully so.
Is Philly the best team on paper in pro football? I mean, you referenced Jalen Hurts, and it seems like everybody talks about All right, the two most important things you need in pro football: elite quarterback, elite coach. And I feel like I hear a lot of people question Nick Sirianni. And to your point, a lot of people don't believe Jalen is that guy. But what does that say about the roster that Howie Roseman's built around them? Are they the best roster in pro football?
Yeah, without question. After position group equal, it absolutely is. It wasn't supposed to be. They drafted outside of their minds, right? I mean, the value that they got from Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean both in the draft. Zach Bones on a one-year deal as a first-team All-Pro linebacker. They hit obviously really well on a guy, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis. These are all recent draft picks, man. Like they ran very hot in player acquisition. Now, usually the best team in football did exactly that, right? And you're hot for a couple of years and you're cold for a couple of years and somebody else takes the crown. But Howie Roseman's now done this a few times where he's able to just quickly accumulate some talent, plug a lot of a position with veteran stopgaps and with first-year rookie starters, and all of a sudden, bang, you got yourself a contender. And so it's hats off to Howie Roseman, who just has a very shrewd understanding of the risks to take, where to invest, where not to invest, how to double up and triple up on certain positions, offensive line investment. Eagles are constantly putting bodies there. It's been to their benefit. So, yeah, I think the roster has been built extremely well. The best team goes into, right, some more play calling stuff. You know, the Eagles are built to win a very specific style of game. They need to have the lead. They need to run the football. They can't fall behind too much. So there's weaknesses to the team, but the roster on paper, yeah, stem to stern, most talented in the league.
All right, Ben, before I set you loose, the early line is KC minus 1.5. The over-under is 49.5. So Vegas likes Kansas City, but only slightly. What is what's the Ben Solak very early take on the Super Bowl that we'll see in a couple weeks?
I think Chiefs favorite is correct. I think we're going to see this close around 2.5, maybe 2.5 with, kind of juice toward the Eagles or what have you. But the Chiefs are a team that's been here many more times. They've been here before. They obviously beat the Eagles a couple of years ago. In Mahomes, you have a quarterback you trust a lot more in a trailing game script than you do the Eagles. The thing that I keep coming back to with the Eagles is that we have not seen this team trail in the second half. We're talking about trail in the fourth quarter, trail by multiple scores in the third quarter, really have a negative game script. We haven't seen this since week 4. They played the Buccaneers. Everybody was hurt, right? They know A.J. Brown, no Devontae Smith, no Lynn Johnson, and they lost. Since then, it's been one-score deficits in the third quarter. They've done such a good job controlling the clock and winning on their game script that we don't really know what this team looks like if they have to throw their way out of a hole, which is a crazy thing to say in the last week of January, but it's true. We have not seen that from this version of the team. And so if you tell me Eagles are up 28-14 with 14 minutes left in the game, I'm like, oh, man, Chiefs can still win this thing. You reverse that, Chiefs up 14 with 14 minutes left, I have no idea if the Eagles have the ability to operate the offense, right, if they can't live with the Saquon Barkley carries and make sure they get to 2nd and 5, so on and so forth. So I have more doubt about the Eagles. I think the Chiefs are the right team to be favored. But, hey, if the Eagles end up getting that first half lead, they can make sure that Mahomes only gets 2-3 possessions and salt that game away. It's going to be a good one.
Ben, you're the man. Appreciate the time. Ignore all of them. I know you know this, but, I got your back, buddy. So great work, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you, Spence. Appreciate it. You have a good one.
All right, the great Ben Solak over at ESPN released what I thought to be was a very fair video of the options Josh Allen had on that 4th and 5, namely the Khalil Shakir option as they put him in motion. And when you look at it, he did have a ton of space in front of him. Now, Josh had a couple of free rushers right in his face, and I just am so gutted for Dalton Kincaid. But, Porter, you have some – now, let's make sure we're not doing what the Jazz did after they lost to the Clippers. And they're like, oh, by the way, Rudy was hurt and Donovan had a sore ankle. But you have some context on what Dalton's been dealing with, yeah?
Yeah, well, obviously, he dropped the pass. He was in position to make that play. It's no excuse for that. But, yeah, he's been playing with a torn PCL and some legit damage to his knee for parts of the playoffs. So he's been playing through some stuff, which is no surprise if you know anything about Dalton Kincaid. He's actually kind of had a pretty unfortunate injury history. He just happens to play through it all, which, I mean, some players end up doing that. But that's part of the context to his postseason.
Well, Bishop got his first starts and played well. Actually saved a touchdown at the beginning with a tackle on, I think it was Kareem Hunt, but got trucked a little bit at the end there. By the way, there's some breaking Utah football news. Keenan Johnson has entered the transfer portal, cornerback, 63 tackles, had 1 pick as well. Those are his career stats. So Keenan Johnson, another Utah cornerback, entering the NCAA transfer portal because, of course, When it comes to college football, all the news has to do with the transfer portal or NIL this year. We do have some way too early lines for Big 12 teams as far as winning the national championship. You might be surprised where Utah is, and you might be surprised where BYU is. We'll get to that coming up in a bit. On the other side, we'll do some NBA. There's some breaking news that Jimmy Butler has been suspended indefinitely by the Miami Heat, and we'll talk to Tom Haberstroh about this. He's going to cost himself some money. And then we will move over to Stevenson Sylvester and Bill Riley for more football later on a Monday. Keep it here on ESPN 700. Got Stevenson Sylvester rolling by. Called out about an hour from right now. And then the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, will join us to do a little college football and some college basketball. There's some Utah football breaking news we'll get to coming up in just a little bit. But let's do a little NBA on a Monday afternoon with our buddy Tom Haberstroh. Tommy, happy Monday. How we doing?
Doing great. What a great song to lead into the Jimmy Butler news. Just fantastic.
Yes. And I'll give my producer, Porter, credit for that. Before we get to the Jimmy Butler news, and for our fans that are like, wait a second, our listeners like, wait a second, he's been suspended, and definitely we'll get to that. I've heard a lot of like Patrick Mahomes is now Michael Jordan in the 90s. And as you know, my 90s experience steeped in two basketball teams. One was the New York Knicks and the other was the Utah Jazz. So I'm uniquely qualified to talk about Michael Jordan ripping the rings off of fingers of a lot of players. Does that comp jive with you? Like the bigger the moment, the bigger the Chiefs seem to, answer the questions that are asked of them. And that's kind of how Mike was certainly in the 90s for a lot of teams, including the Jazz and the Knicks.
Yeah, I mean, he was beaten in the playoffs. We know that. But just like he was beaten by Tom Brady in the playoffs and then got revenge and decided to dominate the league, in the same way that Larry Bird had Michael Jordan's number, and then after the Celtics kind of faded out, it was Michael Jordan's reign. And of course the Pistons, and then Michael retired, and then Hakeem and the Rockets had a couple championships in there, and Michael did come back and did not win the finals when he came back initially, losing to Orlando Magic, but he got his revenge the next year. It's a little more complicated, the one-to-one comp. I really liked the Steph Curry comp. Steph Curry being Patrick Mahomes, and then James Harden and the Rockets being Josh Allen. In this way where you had two championships, took a year off, and then came back and did the same thing with Kevin Durant. It was just like this guy, Steph Curry, just has James Harden's number, that no matter what James Harden does, whether it's with Russell Westbrook or Dwight Howard or Chris Paul, Mike D'Antoni, doesn't matter. Steph Curry's going to win. I like that analogy, but I also think basically we're talking, is it Patrick Mahomes, is he Michael Jordan or Steph Curry? The answer is he's pretty freaking great, and that's awesome. That's awesome that we're watching this guy play and continue to get this opportunity to watch this guy play in the Super Bowl, which is going to be great.
All right, now let's get over to the breaking news that came down about a half hour ago. The Miami Heat have elected to suspend Jimmy Butler indefinitely, and part of their release, he is withholding services, so that will cost him a cool $530K per game. So he's going to lose some money here. Look, man, I've talked to you about this and my other NBA guests. You hear the news, Butler wants out. You're like, here we go again. This dude just grades on people, even though when he's right and he's invested, he's still really good. And then you dig into what it would mean for Miami if they moved on from him. And I very much believe there's a chance that Pat Riley just does not move him, because I don't know how much sense it makes for the organization. But the news coming down today does seem to change things. And whenever Eric Spoelstra is asked about this, you can tell it's almost like you're asking him about his wife cheating on him or something. Like he has no patience for any conversation about it. He's over it. Your thoughts on what just came down and what's next?
So to give some context, Jimmy Butler was supposed to come back on Monday night to go play for the Miami Heat once the suspension was over. And he showed up to shoot around, and he was, according to ESPN, Shams Charania instructed that he was going to be coming off the bench at shoot around, and he wasn't going to be starting. And then he walked out of practice. Okay. What's interesting about this is that we went through an entire shoot around media availability, and none of this was brought up. It wasn't divulged because the Miami Heat have instructed Eric Spoelstra, at least Eric Spoelstra maybe instructed himself. I don't know if it was his decision or the media relations group or Pat Riley or Mickey Harrison, but basically he's shutting down any Jimmy Butler talk. And so we didn't find out about this, that Jimmy Butler walked out of the shoot around in the middle of practice because he was fed up with the fact that he wasn't starting until 6 hours later. And so I think it's instructive about the media condition right now, or the media environment, that a national reporter who was not there was able to report this story, Shams Charania at ESPN, and no one in local media had any sort of whispers about it because the Heat were able to control the conversation. So I wonder, like, what would have happened in like 2 hours, when we found out that Jimmy Butler was not at the arena, like what would have happened? Because the Miami Heat have put out a statement, and reading from the statement at 4:50, 20 minutes ago, we are suspending Jimmy Butler without pay effective immediately for an indefinite period of time to last no fewer than 5 games. The suspension is due to a continued pattern of disregard of team rules, engaging in conduct detrimental to the team, and intentionally withholding services. And this is the punchline. This includes walking out of practice earlier today. So this is important because, obviously, they want to have Jimmy Butler on their team, a guy of that talent on their team. But also, there are 5 games left before the trade deadline. So the Heat are effectively shelving Jimmy Butler and all of this stuff until the trade deadline. And then they will figure things out after that, whether he's traded or not. But as we've talked about, he has a player option for next year. This would be a different situation if he had just an expiring contract, because this next couple weeks would be the last opportunity for the Miami Heat to trade Jimmy Butler. I guess you could do a sign and trade this summer if you signed him to, a deal and then traded him, kind of like what they did with Paul George with the Clippers. But this is an untenable situation. We all know it. And I remember I was doing the Blazers game a few days ago, Blazers Heat, and the Blazers blew out the Miami Heat, blew them out. And in the fourth quarter, there was no Jimmy Butler or Bam Adebayo. Eric Spoelstra had benched his 2 stars after it took place in the third quarter. And I remember thinking to myself, did we just watch the last game of Jimmy Butler in a Miami Heat uniform? Because Eric Spoelstra benched him and was like, yeah, this isn't working out. This is not good. The effort level, the defense, all of it, I'm done. And so I think maybe my premonition was right at that point, which that was the last time that Jimmy Butler played in Miami Heat uniform, was with about a couple minutes left in the third quarter. He was benched, and he's never been seen from again. So what I come back to is that player option could actually work in both of their favors by being like, look, it might help facilitate a trade. If you stick around, play nice, just don't disrupt things anymore, we can maybe trade you this summer when things start to open up. But the reason why they say it's not a 5-game suspension and they say indefinitely, because I'd imagine that they are going to talk to Jimmy Butler and his representation, Bernie Lee, and try to figure out, like, what is going to be a mutually agreed upon, like, solution here. Because him coming back to the team and walking out in the middle of a team practice, that is not a good situation for anybody. And it's not good for Jimmy. And I think every time he does that, I think it makes it less likely that a team is going to throw in or a pick or a second rounder or loosen up the trade restrictions, because the more that he does this, the more it becomes apparent to the acquiring team, like, this is a fuse that is going to be lit. And I wonder if Jimmy Butler and his actions, it just feels like both situations, this is a divorce that needed to happen a long time ago.
Tell me if you think there's anything to, what Pat Riley said last year during the postseason. Jimmy Butler made some comments about the Knicks, how they were guarding certain teams. And Pat essentially said, look, if you're not playing, you should keep your mouth shut. Do you think this marriage has been fractured and frayed for quite some time?
I do think so. And, if you look at when things started to change, it was around then. I think the context was Jimmy Butler, after being too hurt to perform and was sidelined in the playoffs. He essentially said that I think the Celtics are lucky that they didn't face him, or the Knicks were lucky they didn't face him. And Pat Riley's like, dude, if you're not going to play, then shut your mouth. And I think this is larger. I wouldn't say a boomer commentary, or this is coming from an old dude, hashtag maybe I'm washed. But I think there is this like growing resentment from the older NBA players or former NBA players or former coaches that look on the entitlement or the so-called perceived entitlement of players who are too injured to play, but also willing to talk in the media as if like they participated in the team's effort to beat this other team. And the competition has been lost and the fire has been lost and that there's too much social media influence, all this stuff. I do think that Jimmy Butler probably was taken aback by that, took it personally, like, oh, really? Okay. And then this year it just never came together. I mean, think about it. Think about where we've been, Spence. Like, Jimmy Butler a month ago had a triple-double for the Miami Heat. You can say that, like, man, he's washed up, like he's too old, he's 35, he's a guy that how much does he have left in the tank? I mean, the dude had 35 points, 10 assists, and 19 rebounds against the Pistons a month ago. I think he has something left. I don't think the Memphis Grizzlies do it. I don't think that they're going to try to, steal him away from Phoenix. I think eventually he has played his last game for the Miami Heat. I think there's going to be a 3 or 4 team trade where Jimmy Butler goes to the Phoenix Suns. That's my prediction. It's been my prediction, and it's just a matter of whether, the Phoenix Suns, where they reroute those picks from Utah, figuring out a way to make, I think, 3 quarters out of $1. So I think Utah Jazz did well to get that 2031 unprotected pick from Phoenix while giving up those 3 picks that really are not adding up to $1.
This is why you're good at this, because that's where I was going next. So let's expand on that. So, of course, we're all wondering whether or not the Jazz will be active prior to this trade deadline that's coming up, but they have already made a move. And look, there's no way of knowing whether or not this is going to work out, but it does seem like on paper it's a risk that you take. And Tom, it's obviously clear that the Jazz did their calculation mainly on the Cavs and said, all right, our first-round pick from Cleveland this year is probably going to be 29 or 30. They're going to be good in 2 years. We think our first-round pick from them in 2027 is late first round. Now, 2029 is the wild card, but still, it's at least favorable of 3. So, we heard Zanuck. He stopped by the Jazz broadcast the game after they made this deal. And obviously, the calculation includes the potential of Phoenix being in a pivot situation or a rebuild situation in 2031. So you exchange what probably will be 3 late first-round picks for the wild card ability to grab their unprotected in 2031 and hope that Phoenix is in a precarious spot. Now, Matt Ishbia has proven to be a enthusiastic check writer, I guess is what I'll say. So I would imagine he's going to try to keep them good as long as he possibly can. But who knows what 2031 will look like. So your in-detail breakdown of the deal the Jazz and the Suns made last week.
Well, I think it was smart because if you remember how the Cavs drafted Kyrie Irving with the number 1 overall pick in 2011, do you remember why they got the number 1 pick in 2011?
I'm going to say it was a draft pick they were able to acquire from somebody a few years before that was unprotected.
Yeah, unprotected pick from the Los Angeles Clippers.
Clippers, okay.
The Clippers traded Baron Davis and a first to acquire Mo Williams and Jamario Moon.
Oof.
And they traded a unprotected 2011 first-round pick to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And what happened? They struck lottery, and they got Kyrie Irving, which ended up, by the end of that rookie scale deal, they got LeBron back with Kevin Love, and by the end of that, they got a championship in Cleveland. So things can change very quickly in the NBA. And those unprotected lottery or unprotected first-round picks with mismanaged organizations, like I think Matt Ishbia right now is one of those new owners that's just going crazy. Like, I got to dig myself out of this somehow. What am I going to do? And he's backed into a corner, and he's making, I think, rash decisions here. Trading an unprotected 2031 pick is the kind of deal you do when you're out of moves. And so, yeah, he might end up acquiring Jimmy Butler, but he's not looking at 2031. And, in fact, he should be looking at the fact that Kevin Durant is at the end of his career. Devin Booker is not going to be, I don't think, going to be happy about being in a floundering team. And Jimmy Butler is 35. Like we said, how many more years does he have left? Well, it looks like the Phoenix Suns want to extend Jimmy Butler, give him, the years that he wants, because the Miami Heat wouldn't. And they've got an ownership group that is just going to throw good money after bad. And when you're the Utah Jazz, you want to go to the market with that team. Go into trade talks for the same reason that the Cleveland Cavaliers are like, sure, you want Mo Williams and Jamario Moon? We'll take on Baron Davis's contract. And I know you guys don't care about first-round picks, but we'll take your 2011 first-round pick, and then it turns into Kyrie Irving. So is it going to be the number one pick? No. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and predict that it's going to be number one, but it's certainly more valuable with all of the, basically no chance of it being number one in 25, 27, and 29. Because they're going to have basically the worst of these three deals or the worst of multiple team selections. So it's almost impossible for them to have the number one pick. So I suspect you're going to see right now a lot of people saying, you know what, Phoenix did pretty well in that trade. But until 2031 happens, we truly won't understand the ramifications and the butterfly effect of that deal, much in the same way that LeBron James winning the 2016 NBA championship finally for Cleveland can all trace back to that trade of an unprotected 2011 first-round pick going to Cleveland.
So do you think, because this is a unique deal, and a lot of people around here, when they got the breaking news, were like, all right, what exactly is this? What are we doing here? And when you look at OKC, when you look at San Antonio, when you look at Brooklyn, Utah, although they don't have as many picks as they did last week, they still have a lot. Houston, Charlotte, there are 5 or 6 teams that own 60-plus picks over the next 5-6 years. Do you think we'll see more deals like this moving forward because of the imbalance in draft asset ownership in pro basketball right now?
Yeah, 100%. The Oklahoma City Thunder can't play all those picks. They can't. They can trade them to teams that want multiple firsts to open up their Stepien rule violations and grease the wheels on a potential Jimmy Butler trade, whatever next year's Jimmy Butler trade would be. And so I think OKC is going to be on the market to make the same deal that Danny Ainge and the front office did here, which is, how do we get unprotected firsts? Well, we can combine and consolidate 2 or 3 or 4 first-round picks, and then the acquiring team can have more flexibility in trades because they don't – the Ted Stepien rule says teams cannot trade away their first-round picks in consecutive seasons. So they have to figure out a way, these teams, like Utah just did, all right, we also can't add 16 players to this core. There's only 15 players on a roster, and we have 15 really good players right now. So what I think OKC is going to have to do is figure out a way to consolidate 3 okay first-round picks into unprotected first-round picks. So I think you're going to see Utah. I think you're going to see OKC and San Antonio consolidate their first-round picks into maybe one or maybe a player. I actually went the other way. Last week at Yahoo, I wrote this column why the San Antonio Spurs should trade for Steph Curry. And it's kind of related to your question, but they have 4 additional picks above their own that they can trade, first-round picks. And so even if they put 4 first-round picks for Steph and Curry into a trade, they still have all of their picks going forward. So, this is a way for San Antonio, for Utah, and OKC to hey, what really expensive star can I acquire? And Stephen Curry is going to make $62 million in 3 years. Who would want that guy at that age? And the answer is, if you're paying Victor Wembanyama $16 million in 3 years, he's making less than the mid-level exception, then who cares how much Steph Curry makes, or who cares how much Kevin Durant makes? When you have a guy who's an MVP candidate every year for the next 3 years making Max Strus money, then throw 4 picks in there and go get Steph Curry, or go get Damian Lillard, or go get Giannis Antetokounmpo, because those first-round picks, you might be giving up a future star player. But the Spurs and the Jazz are going to still have all of their picks left. So they're still going to have a lot of bites at the apple in the draft, even if they put 4 first-round picks and send it to a team like Golden State or a team like Phoenix Suns.
So proud of you for not uttering the term optionality once during that answer, Tom. Well done, my friend. Well done.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. I'm not quite in the Salt Lake, Silicon Valley tech world yet, but maybe Charlotte will become that place, and I will be using optionality every third sentence. It hasn't happened yet.
I don't know. It probably says more about me than anything else. When it comes to the buzzword term we're all supposed to use, I just push back on it. Now I'm like, whenever I hear somebody say optionality, I feel like they're trying too hard. It's like somebody who uses Prism all the time. Like, you're not that smart. Stop trying.
Well, it used to be flexibility, right?
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Remember that word?
Yep.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Now we call it optionality, but that's what flexibility is. That's what it is like I have options. I'm able to flex in different areas. Like I'm able to pivot. So now it's going to be, once we throw out optionality, it's going to be like pivotability. Ready?
Ooh.
In like 3 years,
Ooh.
Pivotability.
I like that one.
Is there a better way to say pivotability that I'm not even thinking of? But just put it down. Put it down. And remember, we had this conversation.
I love it. All right. Staying with the trade deadline, but moving off Butler. What else are you hearing? It seems like it has we'll revisit it, and we won't have to continue to because it's right around the corner. Every time I read some trade primer, they talk about the Jazz. The Jazz have clean books. They have draft capital. They can absorb a contract and release the player like they did with Westbrook and Derrick Rose or whatever. So hearing anything about the Jazz at all, and attendant to the question away from Utah, what else are you hearing, besides the Butler stuff?
I am looking at Zach LaVine. The team's 8 games under 500 in Chicago. And if you had asked me whether Zach LaVine would be a prized possession at the trade deadline over the summer, I would have thought you're crazy. Because Zach LaVine is a guy that last year only played 25 games and seemed like he was a big net negative contract, because in 2025, this year, he has $43 million coming to him at the cap, 46 next year, and then has a player option for 48.9 in 2027. This summer, I would have said that's a net negative. Now, I'm like, man, a lot of teams should try to get Zach LaVine out of Chicago. The problem is that Arturas Kornishovas, the GM for the Chicago Bulls, has been notoriously resistant to trading his guys. He finally pulled the trigger with Alex Caruso going to OKC for Josh Giddey. Didn't work out very well for them. I think for Chicago fans hoping to do a reset or a rebuild, I don't think that is going to pay off well. I mean, it's even going to look worse when Caruso locks down Jason Tatum in the playoffs, in the finals, and then OKC wins a title this year. I just think that the Chicago Bulls need to do a reset, and I'm curious to see where Zach LaVine goes, because if I'm Chicago, I trade him right now. I don't know if a guy who's, come off the injuries that he's had in his career, whether there will be a better time than to trade him right now. He's got 2 more years left on his contract, and as a guy who, yes, he's a 2-time All-Star, 29 years old, going to be 30. I feel like you get a lot of draft picks and you move him. I think that's the most interesting name on the market right now, is what are the Chicago Bulls going to do with Zach LaVine? Because right now they're in a 10th seed. They're a 10th seed in the Eastern Conference. What's the point? You're not a good team. And in any other year, if there was no play-in tournament, we would all be talking about Zach LaVine as being the biggest name at the trade deadline. But I think the Chicago Bulls should be trading him. And teams that would acquire him, I think you're looking at the Lakers. I think you're looking at Golden State. I think you're looking at teams that need an injection of something, a star player, that have a timeline of veteran guys who over the next couple of years need a guy to take the reins. And I think Zach LaVine makes a lot of sense for Milwaukee, makes a lot of sense for the Lakers, teams that want a big swing and want to add a guy who is kind of like a much younger Paul George, not defensively, but offensively can, fill up the points column real fast. And there are not many guys who can get 30 points a game on the market, and I think he's one of them.
Latest Jazz rumors, John Collins to Sacramento. Do you think that makes sense? You think that's something we could see?
I think so. With the Sacramento Kings, they're much their point differential suggests that they're actually a top 5 team in the West. But their record, they've had some really clutch losses, really tough ones down the stretch. And so their record might not seem like a buyer. They're 23-22. But I do think that internally they want to get more veteran players. Keon Ellis has been awesome for them. I thought that De'Aaron Fox was going to be traded at the deadline. Probably isn't going to be the case. But he has not signed an extension in Sacramento. I don't think that's a good fit in Utah. I don't know if he hurts their chances for Cooper Flagg. I think he does hurt their chances for Cooper Flagg. But I could see them being in a 3-team deal where John Collins ends up in Sacramento. And then the Utah Jazz acquire some assets from Sacramento because they already made a coaching change. You can tell that they're trying to win now, and John Collins would help that.
All right, Tom, before I set you loose, there is one somewhat interesting situation with actually the current Jazz team. And it's hard to make this team interesting because they're not trying to win, but we're trying to learn about some of these young players. And I believe for the first time, with both these players healthy, because you and I have talked about the Keontae stuff, and I continue to try to be optimistic about a player that continues to show the inability to take good shots. His decision-making isn't great, and he just does not make shots. I don't know how else to say it. Like, all the way back to college, now the early portion of his pro career, the percentages aren't what I want them to be and what we need to see to indicate that he's improving. But against Memphis, Will elected to start Isaiah Collier, who, by the way, has some lead guard tendencies that nobody else on the roster has, maybe outside of Patty Mills 10 years ago. But there's a lot to like about what we're seeing from Isaiah. He starts, Keontae comes off the bench. And I do believe when Keontae George is fully baked as an NBA player, and, I don't know if he will be here or elsewhere, his role is a combo scoring guard that comes off the bench, kind of like I think Colin Sexton is, and kind of like I know Jordan Clarkson is. There's a lot of redundancy on the roster. But 33 minutes for Keontae, 3 of 15, 0 of 8 from 3. But the rotation decision might indicate maybe where the Jazz are at right now with Keontae's development. Give me your thoughts on that before I set you loose.
God, he'd be so good if he could hit a shot.
Mm-hmm.
It would open up so much because, as someone who covers Scoot Henderson, he's been on a tear recently. Scoot Henderson had one of the best 5-game stretches you'll see from a young point guard. And it's just trying to find some consistency. But what I love about Keontae George is that assist-to-turnover ratio, especially over the last few games. He's made a lot of great progress in limiting turnovers. And if he adds a 3-point shot, or at least any shot, getting to the rim, finishing at the rim, hitting his 3-point shot, which we all projected to be better than what is shown, you could see like a Tyrese Halliburton, if he continues this assist-to-turnover ratio and taking care of the ball, you could see something like that, but it just hasn't come together yet. But I think, when you're that young, it's so hard to make like a really good assessment of where this guy's going to be in his prime because he just turned 21. And same thing with Scoot Henderson, just about to turn 21. It's really hard. De'Aaron Fox, Russell Westbrook were not good in their first couple of years in the league. That's not to say that they're both going to be all-stars, Scoot Henderson and Keontae George, but the consistency is the issue. It's like trying to figure out if they're in over their head and they're swimming in the deep end a little too much here as a young point guard in today's NBA. I mean, I just, there's part of me that wonders if the future of the NBA is these bigs like Jokic, like Jalen Johnson, where they're LeBron, Draymond, where it's like the future is having a big who can facilitate everything for you. And I wonder if the days of like Damian Lillard and Steph Curry, it's just so much harder to do that. It's having your lead guard beat everything for you. It's something to watch is whether, Keontae George and Scoot Henderson, if the game changes so much so that like you want your bigs to be the facilitator rather than a point guard. So we'll see. But Keontae George, I think they're just trying stuff right now. And much in the same way that Portland is having different looks, I think Will Hardy's smart to just like see what Collier can do as a starter with Keontae coming off the bench. And, you got 40 more games left in the season. Let's see what happens.
All right, Tommy, appreciate the time on a Monday. Have a great week, and we'll get you on soon. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, Spence.
Tom Haberstroh, busy boy, a lot of podcasts, Substack, TomTheFinder.com. He's on the Portland Trail Blazers broadcast team. You can find the links to all of his work on his Twitter page, which is just at Tom Haberstroh. That's where you find him. Yeah, NBA trade deadline, February the 6th. So right around the corner. We'll see if the Jazz do anything as the NBA continues to kind of move towards the All-Star break. 2 white dudes in the dunk contest. Never thought I'd see that. Anyway, I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Okay, here's the deal. The big game is almost here, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prize Picks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. Prize Picks is also giving away a free pick for the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw for 1 yard to win. Remember, you only need to get 2 squares right to win money. If you're correct on at least one other stat projection, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Now, check the promos tab to tell any of our Super Sweat Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So if you haven't tried it, you might as well get free money and utilize that for the big game, the last football game of the year coming up. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. All right, we've got Stevenson Sylvester set to join us. Bill Riley in the 4 o'clock hour. Coming up next, some breaking news for Utah football. There's a player that's in the transfer portal. We'll tell you who that is. We'll do a little college football. Also, the way too early odds to win the national championship for teams in the Big 12 have been released. You might be surprised where Utah is. I think you'll definitely be surprised where BYU is. We'll do that coming up on the other side on a Monday right here on ESPN 700. Monday to you. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. Jam-packed sports weekend with some NBA, some college basketball, a little Utah Hockey Club. They got up at Ottawa. Utah Hockey Club in the midst of a tough stretch. They're 7 games in to, I think it's a 16-game stretch where every team they play has more points than they do on the table. So a tough stretch for the Utah Hockey Club. Obviously, both the NFC and the AFC championship games in pro football, which is what we've spent the majority of our time, certainly in the first hour. Tommy Haberstroh stopping by for a little NBA. But a couple of random pieces of Utah football news that we'll get to during this segment before we are joined by Stevens and Sylvester and, of course, Bill Riley, the voice himself coming up, and the Chiefs fan himself coming up at 4:30. Sly stops by at 4. But, Porter, let's break this down. So Keenan Johnson, who I think was slotted in potentially as a starter at the cornerback position coming up next year. Keenan was a Georgia Tech transfer to the U. And he has announced about an hour ago that he is entering the transfer portal. Give me your thoughts. What do you think on Keenan deciding to take off?
Yeah, obviously a guy that Utah would like to have in their locker room, a perfectly capable Division I, Power 4, whatever you may call it. But and you mentioned he could be a starter for the Utes coming in. But the question there is if he'd even be ready. As you know, dealt with a season-ending knee injury over the course of last season, and there's some question on if he'd be good to go even for fall camp and for kickoff. So losing him is it's tough. You want him in that locker room, but I think the Utes were kind of pressing forward as if they weren't going to have him for kickoff because they weren't sure if they would. And as we know, that's one thing that's bitten the Utes in the tail when they've tried that strategy before.
So we'll see where Keenan lands. That news came down about an hour ago. Also, earlier today, and look, this is just fodder for conversation, but I do have to say I was a little bit surprised with this. Of course, you can always get odds at any time you want on almost anything. Every day I get emails from people that do it for a living, and they give me prop bets for Penguins Sharks tonight, right? So you can get odds on anything, but the way too early, according to Circus Sports, odds for the 2025-2026 national champion are in, and this came down earlier this morning. Ohio State is your favorite, no surprise there. Georgia comes in at second, then it's Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Alabama, Notre Dame, Clemson, LSU, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas A&M. On the Big 12 side of things, okay, the odds to win a national championship, there are 2 teams that are plus 25,000. What does that mean? Well, that means if you bet $1,000 right now on either of these 2 teams to win a national championship, and they do, your payout would be $25,100. So you got an extra grand lying around. 2 teams at the top getting plus 25,000 odds in Vegas, Kansas State and Utah are the 2 teams out of the Big 12 that have the shortest odds to win a national championship. Is that just, Porter, is that just that's got to be a Kyle Whittingham commentary. That has to be like, hey, we're going to do the best we can to analyze this stuff, because that's better than Arizona State plus 30,000. That's better than Iowa State. BYU, by the way, plus 50,000 to win a national championship. And if we're honest, nobody in the Big 12 most likely is going to win a national championship. But the fact that Utah's at the top there with K-State, that has to just be a Kyle Whittingham Vegas take, I would imagine.
It's certainly some respect for the head ball coach and for, the Utes' ability to, even on, as you mentioned, kind of down years, remain competitive and go into the next season without turning into a cycle, right? It's a moment in time rather than a big picture reflection of where the program is. And I think there's some confidence that that's where Utah sits. It's an ode to Kyle Whittingham and his staff for sure, but it's probably a confidence in Devin Dampier and the Utes figuring out their quarterback situation. Because as we saw last year, Spence, the lines based on week to week, based on the Utes quarterback situation, they were moving double digits, which you do not see in college sports very often. So for the guys in Vegas, they pay attention to who's under center because it matters. And for Utah, they do feel like they have their guy. So I think there's some confidence there too.
Yeah, by the way, in case you missed it, because I just haven't heard it talked about anywhere else, Jason Beck joined our show about 2 weeks ago, and I asked him, so I know we're all assuming that Devin Dampier is the starting quarterback, but because the past couple of years have conjured up a little PTSD across the course of Utah fans, wondering who their starting quarterback was going to be week in and week out, I just point blank asked him, I'm like, dude, is the job's Devin? Is the job's Devin's? And he essentially said yes. So that's kind of what we're looking for, a little bit more clarity for the Utah football starting quarterback situation. Utah football also, so I was wondering over the weekend, I was pulling up social media, seeing a lot of high school kids posting about visits for Utah football. So Utah football hosted prospects for the 2026 and 2027 class, what they call Junior Day. And they had a bunch of in-state kids on campus over the weekend. So if you were wondering why you were getting all these social media posts in your algorithm, well, that's why. So Utah football looking for these rising juniors to potentially get in as early as you possibly can. Now, certainly in the modern day and age of recruiting landscapes, you get in a lot earlier than sophomore or junior year of high school these days, which is a little gross in my opinion. But Utah football busy over the weekend. For the Utah men's basketball team, Baylor was in town over the weekend. And ultimately, after winning 3 straight Big 12 games, I just continue to believe the team's inability to generate offense in a phone booth, like when you need it at that moment, generate offense when the clock is winding down. I mean, Ezra is really good if he has the ball in space in the right spots, but he's not a ball in hand offense initiator, generate the offense guy. Gabe, poor kid. It's easy to look at Gabe Madsen right now, and if you're not watching, you pull up the stats and you're like, wait, can he not shoot? Teams, and look, Baylor's really well coached. Scott Drew is a national championship coach. Teams just sell out to stop Gabe Madsen. It really is watching. It's like watching when Reggie Miller used to come off the screens for the Pacers, or even the modern day example of Stephen Curry. So Gabe is the leading scorer right now, 15 points a game, but he's shooting 38% from the floor and 31% from three, 86% from the line. I mean, he is a knockdown shooter. He's one of the best standstill shooters in the Big 12. He's one of the best spot-up shooters in the Big 12, and he moves really well without the ball. Baylor, just like BYU did. Houston, we don't even need to talk about that game. It wasn't even a fair fight. Gabe was your leading scorer with 8 against Houston. Baylor selling out to make sure every time Gabe comes off the screen, two players at least are, one's trying to deny him the ball, and if he's able to catch, they're running another at him. And I don't mind the fact that he's taking a bulk of threes. Like Steve Kerr often talks about wanting Steph Curry to take 5-6 bad shots a game, because if Steph starts cooking, he can win a game all by himself. Jake Wallin continues to start. Lawson Lovering continues to try to grow. Mike Shravjam's only played 13 minutes because we saw a lot of Myro Little, Hunter Erickson 21 minutes, Keanu Dawes played 19. So Craig is continuing to try to figure out rotationally what he wants to do. Caleb Lohner against his old team played 11 minutes, had 4 points. But Utah basketball, after that stretch where they were able to win those 3 games, and ultimately one of those wins, of course, came at home against BYU, they have fallen back down to earth now, and they just need to find a way to generate offense. They scored 36 points against Houston and then had some, they closed the half against Baylor pretty well, went into the locker room a little bit of momentum, but ultimately could never find space for Gabe, and the other players are not taking advantage of the space his gravity creates to knock down shots outside of, ultimately what we see in spurts from Ezra Asar, who is just a very unique player. Again, not a ball-in-hand initiator, but get him in space on the wing down low. He's got great footwork, can finish with both hands. He's not close to 6'8". He's closer to 6'5". But that's what, it's why the Davon thing hurt so much. Davon rolls into town last year for one year, breaks Jason Kidd's Pac-12 triple-double record. But ultimately, he was very clear about his intention that he was showcasing his talents for a payday, which he got from St. John's. And they're simply lacking that guy. And most of the teams that are going to play in the Big 12 are going to have multiple players that can do that. BYU actually has multiple players that could do that. It didn't kill Utah in that game. But we've seen this team kind of come back down to earth after a really good stretch. They will play Cincinnati. Now, BYU just dump trucked Cincinnati and Provo. I said this last week, when BYU is making shots, and that is kind of the bottom line for them, they're going to be hard for anybody to beat because they can really move the ball and they get a lot of open looks. When they're making shots, they're really, really difficult to beat. Richie Saunders might be their best player. You know, when you look at the Yegor Deming kid, maybe as their best pro prospect or Cannon Catchings, but Richie Saunders might be their best college basketball player. And against Cincinnati, they just overwhelmed them, 80-52. They could not miss from three. Richie was really, really good. And you start to see Yegor Deming adjusting to the American college game. Yegor had 15 points. He had 7 assists, 5 rebounds. He's so big and long. He can see over the defense. He's very composed, mostly makes good decisions. Some of the late game stuff where he's shooting fadeaway threes to try to get them to win it is probably not what Kevin Young is looking for. But as a team, there were 15 of 24 from three. Cannon Catchings came off the bench, went 3 of 4. And Yegor went 3 of 5. But Richie Saunders, 5 of 7 from three, and caused Cincinnati a ton of issues. Cincinnati is a solid defensive basketball team, and so Utah's going to have to find some offensive answers. But Cincinnati is pretty bad on the offensive side of things. So low-scoring game, probably. It's another game here at the Huntsman Center before Utah hits the road February 1st at OKC. The women went down to Provo, and they got a win over BYU. So Utah women on Saturday, it was kind of tough. I was switching back and forth between both games because both the Utah men and the Utah women played on Saturday at 2:30. But Yana Neepkins is in the mix of 2 just dynamite games. She's kind of announcing her arrival on the scene as the star of this team. Man, she is a knockdown shooter. If she's open, and I say this about Gabe, whenever Gabe is open and misses a wide-open three, it feels like it does when another player misses a layup. Against Kansas, Yana Neepkins, 12 of 18 from the floor, 30 points, 10 boards, 8 assists, 6 of 11 from three. Then they go down to BYU. BYU's got that Delaney Give girl, their freshman. Woo, she's good. She's talented. Almost brought them back herself. But Yana against BYU, 32 points. She had 8 boards, 2 assists, 3 steals, 6 of 7 from three, 8 of 16 from the floor, 10 of 12 from the line. She is everything to this team this year. Obviously, there are other good pieces, but Utes go down to Provo. They take care of BYU, and we'll see how they can continue to traverse the new Big 12 space moving forward. Right now, 15-5, 5th in the Big 12 with a record of 6-3. They're going to be hosting Arizona coming up on the 31st. All right, 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. Time now for your chance to enter to win tickets to see the Utah men's basketball team take on Cincinnati. Right now, text Utes to 33986. That's Utes to 33986 for your chance to win tickets to see the Utah men's basketball team. All right, Stevenson Sylvester, Bill Riley, that's your 4 o'clock hour. Keep it here on ESPN 700. The voice himself. Bill Riley's going to stop by today, coming up. Call that 30 minutes or so from right now before we launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the show today. But we'll start the 4 o'clock hour right now with some football with one of our favorites, one of the best to ever do it at the U. Spend some time with the Steelers, good enough to give us some time on a Monday afternoon. It's Sly Stevenson Sylvester. Happy Monday, Sly. How we doing?
Happy Monday, brother. How are you?
Good, man. Good. So let's do a little NFL before we dig into some Utah football. We do have some Utah football news that we'll talk about. I've been struggling to find the accurate Patrick Mahomes analogy. The one that feels right to me is Michael Jordan, as somebody who spent time around the Jazz and the Knicks in the 90s, because every time, and look, we could expand it to the Sonics with Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. We could talk about Barkley and the Suns. Like, every time it seemed like there was a team that was ready to beat Mike, they just couldn't get it done unless Michael Jordan was playing baseball instead of basketball. What's the accurate Patrick Mahomes analogy now that, they're back in the Super Bowl once again?
I don't even know, man. That's a great question. I think he's becoming into a league of his own, right? The opponents that he has to beat year in and year out, he's young or old, he's taking them on and making it happen, right? And you can appreciate it. I mean, I would have to go. I don't think he's beat Tom Brady, right? In the AFC Championship and then in the Super Bowl against the Buccaneers. That may be his only guy that he's, lost multiple games to. 2 of the 3 losses in his playoff career out of his 7-8 year NFL career have been to Tom Brady. So Tom Brady may be his Achilles heel. But, right now, Pat Mahomes, I think he's just, one, being under 30 and now going to his 4th or 5th Super Bowl. This guy is he's creating his own class, man. And it's awesome what he's been able to do. I've said this. It's hard to, aside from, the favorable calls they get, it's hard to, hate what they do. They've gotten to the Super Bowl in so many different ways. And that's what great teams do, right? You get there with what you have. He's got there with an epic passing attack where nobody can slow them down in the passing attack. He's gotten there with an amazing running game, right, where he's had to use his legs, or his running backs have been great. He's gotten there with none of his receivers having a passing touchdown all year, and just the tight ends. And now he's getting there with beating everybody. And so a 15-2 record on the season, just going through these playoffs, knocking off CJ Stroud, knocking off Josh Allen. He's just putting himself in position just to be in a class of his own, man. So it's pretty great to see and witness.
Sly, they've won 17 straight one-score games. Like, it's wild to consider how he's grown, because when he burst on the scene, Alex is back up and then he gets the job, and he really became uber famous because of his big playability with Tyreek Hill back then and a prime Travis Kelce. And if you had one of them in fantasy football, you were winning every week. And that was kind of the thing. Now he's grown into this dude that just figures it out. As somebody who played, pro football on the defensive side, what are the biggest challenges that a player who has the athletic ability and has now grown into a cerebral thinker, and then that offensive set and, ultimately the execution by their head coach, Andy Reid, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to trying to just corral them enough to give your offense a chance to score enough points to beat them?
It's difficult. One being, I'm watching these games and I'm just like, how do I game plan against that? And you can't. Like, what I always talk about quarterbacks is their ability to make pre-snap reads. And so what I pay attention to most when I'm watching Kansas City is what is Patrick Mahomes looking at before the snap? Right? What is he determining? What is he seeing that's going to determine the play that he runs? Right? From every play, they have multiple plays called in the huddle, from running play number 1 or play number 2, or audibling into a completely different play. What is he seeing, man? I love him setting up the protections. Kansas City uses the odd front, the even front, and that's how they determine who's their Mike and what the defense is about and how to attack it. But like his ability to be on the same page as his receivers, right? Like that throw he made to Juju Smith-Schuster late in the game to give him that 30-yard gain. It was just over the linebacker's head, but he had to wait right until that window came open and he knew it was coming open. Even some of the things you see here, he's like, it's covered two, right? And what's a great thing to run against cover two? Running the football. Cover two is a 6-man box, and you got 6 or 7 blockers. It's always good to run the ball against that. And so him calling that out pre-snap is just awesome. But yeah, like you said, man, he's had tons of weapons over the years, and just seeing his growth and what he's going to be able to do here in the next couple of years. It's good that he's in the AFC, because I think the AFC is just loaded with talent for now and in the future. So, but he's definitely getting his now, and he's only a few Super Bowls away from even getting close to some franchises and even Tom Brady.
Josh Allen's 28 years old. The problem is Patrick Mahomes is 29. And,
right.
I feel about Josh the same way I feel about Lamar, the same way I felt about Aaron Rodgers before he finally got his. I actually, for 4 or 5 years, watching Aaron Rodgers play quarterback, I'm like, I've never seen anything like this. He has to get multiple Super Bowls, but he only got one. And breaking news, he's not going to get another.
Yeah, well, he got that one against me. I hate it.
I know, man. I know. I'm sorry. Sorry to bring it up. But my point is, like, I just think Josh and Lamar, I think they're too good. I would be stunned if both of them, quite frankly, finish their pro football careers the way Dan Marino did without a ring, right? So where are you at today on Josh Allen and the potential of him to finally breaking through at some point?
I mean, he's got to stay even kill, man. These are just tough days right here, and you just got to understand that, like, it does get better, right? And you will. Unfortunately, some of the greats that are compared to have won early, and so he's thinking like, I haven't got mine, so am I not enough? And so that sucks. But ultimately, if he can keep his mind in it and make sure that he's competitive each and every year, which I think he does. I think he's winning in other aspects of life. And so it's not going to seriously hurt him, but it's frustrating not getting to that point, but he's got to understand, like, look, I got out of this season healthy. I can go into next season understanding exactly what I need to do, right? We got the number 2 overall record, and we were second in the AFC. I need to get that number 1 seed so I can have home field advantage, right? Like, I hate going to Kansas City. How do I not go to Kansas City? So they need to do what they need to do, and make sure they have the number 1 seed. That's first things first. So you just game plan and retool the next years. But again, like you said, those guys are young. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, now Jalen Hurts is in that mix, and even CJ Stroud is coming up, and we now see Jalen Daniels as well. Like, there's a lot of young talent in here, and so it's going to be open market for a lot of guys. He's just got to keep in it and ride his experience.
All right, you're an NFL general manager. Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen are both 28, and I say you can have one or the other. Who do you pick and why?
Oh, gosh. This is a great question. I answered this before the divisional game, the Bills and the Ravens. I like Lamar Jackson, right? And here's the reason why. One, Josh Allen's great. The way he delivered the ball last night, I don't put that game on him. I mean, you look at it. They lost by 3. They had multiple 2-point conversion fails. There's just a lot of things in that game that could have went the other way, and storylines, whatever. But if I were to start a franchise or say an expansion franchise, and I could take one of those 2 guys, I'm taking Lamar Jackson. Both of them, it's sad we can't beat Patrick Mahomes, and they have loaded all-star rosters. But I got Lamar Jackson, because if I can get, half these guys to come up and deliver the football the way he is, because like Lamar Jackson, he's not going to run as much as his career keeps going, right? But you take a slow Lamar Jackson versus a stagnant quarterback. I'll take that all day. And Lamar Jackson, he doesn't take hits. He's very smart. He gets down. He needs to get better with taking care of the football. Those careless fumbles that we saw in the divisional round, you can't do that, but that's something that can be learned. But the way he delivers the ball, his accuracy, his ability to extend plays and get away from people, I think he's faster than Jaden Daniels, and that's saying something, right? And so I take Lamar Jackson for his accuracy, efficiency, and his ability to just make offense nonstop or unstoppable.
All right, so this stat continues to blow me away because Josh Allen is 4-1 in the regular season against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, but he's 0-4 in the postseason against the very same Chiefs and the very same quarterback and the very same head coach. You're a guy that played regular season football in college, and you won a Sugar Bowl against Alabama in college. You're a guy that played regular season football in the NFL, and you had playoff experience as well. What gives, man? What's the difference? What's the difference between being able to be successful against a team in the regular season and just not being able to get anything done as far as beating them and sending them home come playoff time?
Well, I mean, it goes to the point of what really matters, right? And so, playoff football matters, whether you're the 6th seed or the number 1 seed. It doesn't matter. You got to get the job done. But for me, I hate that everybody puts it on one person, right? Everybody saw the game. Everybody saw the Eagles and Commanders game too. Jaden Daniels played great. Who would have known there would have been those 3 timely turnovers that could have just put the Commanders back. Commanders came back after that Saquon Barkley early touchdown and was in it. It was still good. And, it's more than that one person. So Josh Allen, man, it's hard to put it all on him and his record. Of course, you're the quarterback. You get to bear all of the negative as well as the positive. So you got to do that. But, guys dropping balls, defense not being able to do their job, and the injuries that Buffalo had on defense, didn't enable them. Von Miller, essentially not as great as he is, as much money as they're paying him, so maybe it's time to move on from him. There's other factors in that, right? You got to slow Patrick Mahomes down to give Josh Allen an opportunity as well. And that just doesn't happen. So there's a lot of factors that go into making that happen. It's unfortunate that, Josh Allen can't get it done in the playoffs with that, but it's hard to put it all on one person. Just learning and hopefully he can pass on his experiences and his knowledge of these situations to the new guys on the team when it comes up again.
So a couple local ties here. First of all, your thoughts on that final pass. I don't know how Josh got it off, but our guy Dalton, oh, man, I'm sure he wants that one back. Tough play to make, but, if Dalton watches the replay, he'll probably tell you that he should have grabbed it. What were your thoughts and what's your take on the day after watching Dalton drop that pass that really could have changed the entire thing?
Well, I mean, I've been there. I've dropped
Sure.
I've dropped the ball like that. It's hard to, when the ball being in the air, understanding where it's at, because Josh Allen being under duress, he didn't know where that ball was going to land. Is it going to be short? Is it going to be long? Judging it in the air in real time, understanding the heat of the moment, it being 4th down, all that comes into play. And so, like, for me, it's like, I've been there. I know I've misjudged it. If it was a drop in a different point of the game, nobody really even thinks about it. It sucks. It sucks in that moment, but this is Dalton's 2nd year. He's only going to get better. As I said, I've been there. I've dropped the pass. Luckily, my teammate, picked it off the very next play, so I didn't have to bear that, because I was eaten up about how do I not make that play. But there's so many things that gone on there, so I just understand it, and it sucks. But at the same time, you look at the game, it's like, damn, do we have to go down to the last play to the game had to be decided by this, right? And so there's a lot of other things, right? And again, we talked about pre-snap, judgment there. What was Josh Allen looking at as far as numbers? You bring a guy in motion for what reason? All right, he comes in motion, nobody follows him. They're in zone or they're blitzing. As soon as you hike the ball, you see they're blitzing. You got to go to your number 1 blitz the turn after that. He should have went back to Shakir, which is what that play design is supposed to do with that short motion and going back. And so there's just a lot of things, and not letting the game against Patrick Mahomes, knowing that statistic of 17-0, not come down to the final whistle. And that sucks. And so it's a team game. I just don't want it to ever come down to a single play. But I've been where Dalton's at. He's going to hang his head, and he's only going to come back better.
So news comes down that Taylor Rapp is injured, and so our guy Cole gets the start. Cole Bishop gets his first start with the Bills, and he saved a touchdown early on with that tackle on Kareem Hunt. He had a couple of rough moments at the end where he got trucked pretty good. I thought he had the pick. Overall, I thought he had a pretty solid game. Your thoughts on Cole Bishop, the first start of his career in a playoff game against Kansas City?
Bro, I couldn't imagine me in my rookie year and having to do what he had to do. I thought he did great. Of course, there's always room for improvement. But Cole's a student of the game. This dude studies film better than anybody. When I was interviewing a lot of the older guys when Cole was a freshman, that's all they would talk about. And Cole wasn't great his freshman year, right? That's when we played Ohio State. He wasn't great in that game. But years after that, he got better. And that's what I'm expecting from Cole, is he's just going to get better and better. I think he loves the game. He's an insane talent. He's a guy that's going to put on weight, put on strength, understand. He's going to be a starter for Buffalo going forward. I know they like him over there. He's just a guy that shuts up and just gets the work done. Once he understands the game a little bit more and understands how people play him, because the NFL game and college game are very different. As far as offensive play designs. So if he can understand those differences, year 2 and 3, he's going to be outstanding, man. So this is valuable experience in the key moments in a tight game. He played starting safety the entire game. That right there, that experience, I wish I could have had. Because that's something that you can't ever get back, and it's only going to propel you forward. So Cole Bishop did great, man, and I just think that was prime game time experience for him, that he's going to be an awesome guy of the future for sure.
All right, moving over to Eagles Commanders, and we'll end with some Utes. Let me start here. As a Jets fan, I always cheer for teams that have been down for a while, and the Dan Snyder years were certainly dark for Washington football fans. Your takeaway from year one with Jaden Daniels under center for Washington, and what you think that franchise is in for the next decade or so?
Oh man, they're setting up. They need to buy all of the Jaden Daniels Kool-Aid they can, right? Like this is the guy, man. And when you look at your pre-draft analysis, you got to look at, what am I looking at? What's so different between Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, right? Is it the offensive coordinator? Can you really say it's the system? I don't. I think Jaden Daniels is just a great talent, though. His ability to throw a really good ball, extend the play, but understand what it is, and his humble approach to the game. I think that, he respects his opponent, so he takes them seriously. But he's also got a swagger that he's ultra confident that he's able to get things done. So the NFL better watch out, not just the NFC or NFC East. The NFL better watch out for this guy, because having a loss in the NFC Championship in his rookie year is only going to make him hungrier. Hopefully he can get a stable offensive coordinator or offense that will be with him, for a good amount of years, to where he can ultimately become, Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes and control the offense. But I think this guy he's the future, of this league. Him and CJ Stroud, we're going to see them both in the playoffs, and I can't wait to see that. It's going to be an awesome matchup. But, Jaden Daniels he's awesome. He got that team together, and that was the missing link. I saw it last year. I was like, they got a team. They just need a quarterback. You get Jaden Daniels in there with proper teaching, with a good coach, and Ron Rivera out of there, and Dan Quinn in there, who's a player's guy. Like when I'm forgetting with the receiver that fumbled early in the game, how Dan Quinn goes up to the guys after they make mistakes. It's like, look, we still need you. Like, game ain't over. It was a mistake. We're good, but keep your head up, keep in it. And then after that player played great, right? And that's something Ron Rivera would never do. Ron Rivera doesn't have that type of rapport with players, and so it's all about the right situation, the right fit, and I think Jaden Daniels going into that with Cliff Kingsbury and BJ over there at Washington was just the perfect time.
Have you, and for our listeners who don't know, Brian Johnson, former Ute quarterback, Ute legend, is the assistant head coach and passing game coordinator in Washington. Have you talked to BJ about Jaden? I'd be really curious about, for a guy that has that type of football acumen, his take on this quarterback that he's working with now.
I haven't. I actually haven't. And the times that I've talked to BJ, I haven't talked about Jaden at all. I just know that Jaden is BJ type of player, right? Jaden is like BJ. When BJ was coming out of high school, what everybody was talking about BJ here at Utah, that's Jaden Daniels, right? And Jaden Daniels, to even have an opportunity, he was supposed to come to Utah, right? There's just so much semblance in there with them. And when you listen to interviews with Jaden, you just understand he's got his head on his shoulders and he listens, right? He respects, people and let them, they know what they're doing. And I think that if you give guys like Cliff Kingsbury and BJ an opportunity to teach you, to really invest in you, you're only going to have success. So I think that, Jaden's humbleness going into it, I don't even need to talk to BJ. I know exactly what he's going to say. It's like, that kid's the future. He's great. And so hopefully, this offseason, he just gets better and better, understands exactly what's out. That rookie year is really hard, right? From finishing college, getting the Heisman, doing Senior Bowl, Combine, Pro Days, all these interviews, going to the draft, going to mini camps. That process is crazy. So going into the next year, you don't have to do none of that, right? You go up to OTAs and mini camps. That's all you have to do during the offseason instead of all that other stuff. So hopefully year 2 for Jaden Daniels will be even better because he's getting rest, right? And so just a amazing future ahead of that dude. I haven't talked to BJ yet, but hopefully I could talk to BJ here in the next couple months about his first year with Washington.
All right, before we get over to some Utah football news that just broke, give me your early take. We got 2 weeks, so of course we're going to talk about it every day. Kansas City 1.5-point favorite. That's the opening line. What do you think happens in the Super Bowl, Sly?
And you're looking at it, right? I've always said that I'm a guy of matchups. I think Philadelphia's offense, man, is just amazing. But right, what Steve Spagnuolo does in the Kansas City defense, I think it's his game planning ability that just sets him apart, right? And then you got McDuffie at the cornerback position that'll line up over, A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith. And essentially, I think that's an eliminating factor, but, you do have all of the other weapons in Goddard and Devontae Smith. And so you can do that. And then, of course, Jalen Hurts' ability to do things with his legs. And, we saw what Jalen Hurts did in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. He put on the MVP performance in a losing effort. And so if he can do that here in this game, I think they might have an advantage here. But, for me, it's the defenses, right? And I think that Philadelphia's secondary is too young to keep up with Kansas City's experienced offense, right? You got one of the best to ever do it in Patrick Mahomes, who's only 7 years in and considered the best to ever do it. It's insane. So he's young, considered the best he's ever do it, and he's got weapons across the board from Hopkins to Juju Smith-Schuster, who's guys got rapport with him, to the rookie out of Texas, Travis Kelce, Noah Gray at tight end, the multiple running backs in Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, Patrick Mahomes' ability, to matter who's around him, to do things. I think that secondary and what we talked about in the last segment about pre-snap readability, I got to give the edge to Kansas City here. And so I favor that line. It's going to be a great game. Matchups are there as far as personnel goes. But yeah, man, I got to give the edge to Kansas City.
All right, a little Utah football news. It's not good news on a Monday, but they're going to lose another cornerback, Keenan Johnson, who had season-ending knee surgery. Excuse me. He had a season-ending knee injury, so I don't know if he was going to be ready to go anyway. But nonetheless, it hurts when you look at, just kind of the two deep and where people align. My guess is he would have started. He was a Georgia Tech transfer to Utah, and then about an hour and a half ago, he announced that he's leaving the program. So what's your reaction to this?
I mean, it is what it is. I mean, yeah, Utah did right by you, but you feel like you want to go somewhere else. That's what's crazy, is yeah. I mean, same thing with this Anthony Woods guy, right? The running back. We got him from Idaho. We got him while he was injured. We rehabbed him, and now he got a free year, and he entered the portal. So I'm just like, it sucks because what's going to happen here is you're going to get a doggy dog world coming up, right? You're going to give these universities the ability to treat you like employees, and when you don't do right, you're out, right? There's no you owe me, I owe you. There's no loyalty with all this stuff. It's like, look, this is what the game is. Let's do it, right? These guys make all kinds of money that normal people spend 4 or 5 years can make. These guys make in 6 months, and they don't even play. And so, like, it's crazy. I know he's got injured at the beginning of the season, but if he felt in his heart that I had to get out and make that happen, or of course, everybody always talks about all of this, you know, uh, what do you call it when somebody is trying to steal you from another program?
Coaching.
Everybody, yeah, everybody's talking about poaching and all this other stuff, and so it's real. That stuff is real. You jump in the portal. So I mean, for me, I always wait and see, like, how fast does he commit to another university, right? Like, how fast did Tanavasa commit to BYU, right? How fast did some of these other guys commit to some of these other places? And I'm just like, Kenan Johnson, like, it was a rough year, last year, but it was your first year in the program. So there's not a lot of guys who have invested in the program over the years. And so best of luck to him wherever he goes. But, I think the mantra with Utah this next year would be like, if you don't want to be here, that's fine. We're going to win with the guys that are here. And so we didn't get to see a lot out of Kenan. So it's hard to say, like, we're going to miss you. But, other than the coaches saying Kenan was great, Kenan, or the coaches also said that a lot of other positions were great that didn't pan out last year as well. So, but on tape, we didn't get to see much from this guy, and I, wish him success. But you don't want to be here, don't be here. Simple as that.
Fair enough, Sly. Thanks for the time, man. Have a great week, and we'll chat soon.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, the great Stevenson, Sylvester, Bill Riley joins us coming up next, but let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros. New year, new you, new budget. Save money on your cable. Save money on your internet. Save money on your wireless. Find out the details by dialing 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Dude, we have got some of the awesomest offers right now. And, this Netflix offer, it's gotten even better with the rate increase that Netflix has put out. Guys, this offer is stacked. You get set up with Dish. You get the 2-year promotion. It's now cheaper than Fubo. It's cheaper than YouTube TV. It's cheaper than clearly cable and DirecTV. If you're paying any of these subscriptions, guys, plan on keep going up. But if you get set up with me, I can guarantee it'll stay the same for the next 2 years, cheaper than what you're currently paying. Plus, I'll throw in Netflix for the next 2 years. Guys, that's worth more than $431 just by itself. That offer is a very, very healthy offer. And if you have Netflix, you're spending the money. Well, save yourself $430 plus. Call us up and get set up with the best equipment out there, the biggest, fastest DVR, and have access to all your content wherever you want. Plus, all the streaming apps that you want can be built into the system, and it's easy to use. You don't have to put in passwords or anything. It's all there for you to use whenever you want. Call us up, take advantage of the deals. Plus, sometimes Dish, actually not sometimes, they send out thousands and thousands of these. They send out these individual offers. Now, they're very particular to one person, but if you're like most and me, most of the time you just throw away the mail when it shows up if it doesn't look like it's important. But guys, you may have got a pretty heavy gift card offer available from Dish. Well, I just got access to be able to look that up. So call us up. See if I can get you set up with this fantastic offer with Dish. We'll see if you have an additional offer that was sent to you. We can add that on top of the promotion, get you that additional gift card. Even the Netflix offer in some cases can be combined with that. Call us up today, Get set up with the best price, guaranteed. Plus, we'll throw in dinner at JCW's. Guys, listen, you can continue to pay more and more and more for the same thing, or you can upgrade, get a better product, and pay less. And it's that simple. Call us, 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, time now for the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff. Your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text SPLURGE right now to 508-777-1000. That's SPLURGE. It's a gross word. I don't know why. But text it to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us here at ESPN 700. The voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, is our guest, coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Super Bowl 59 is set. It is the Eagles and it is the Chiefs. It's at Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. The Kansas City Chiefs are an early 1.5-point favorite. Our next guest became a Chiefs fan about 7 or 8 years ago, I believe. The voice of the Utes himself on a Monday, Bill Riley. Bill Riles, happy Monday, buddy.
Spence, thank you. Yeah, it was actually just about 9 years ago I became a Chiefs fan.
Is this getting old to you at all?
Nope.
As somebody who admittedly went through a number of different, very rough stretches as a Chiefs fan, like how does the latest iteration of this unbelievable run land with a fan like you?
I still feel like because I can remember borrowing every rundown former Niners quarterback and having all kinds of things go sideways in the Marty Schottenheimer era, and the Chiefs passing on quarterbacks like Elway and Marino back in the day to draft Todd Blackledge. So there is nothing tiresome about this. I can't believe it's happening. I can't believe that the football gods place number 15 in Kansas City along with Andy Reid and Travis Kelce and others. But now it's not gotten tiresome. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun.
Were you worried at all at any point yesterday?
Yes. Many iterations of that game had me nervous because Josh Allen is unbelievable. I'm not trying. It's weird to say this, but you've been an NBA fan for a long time, and your favorite team, the New York Knickerbockers, were outstanding in the 80s and 90s. They just so happened to run up against a guy named Jordan. So did the Jazz. So did the Suns. So did the Pacers. So there were so many teams, and I kind of feel like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, who are Hall of Fame caliber talents, might be having the unlucky fortune that a lot of teams in the NBA in the 80s and 90s had with Jordan and the Bulls.
So one of my favorite Jeff Van Gundy stories, because Jeff, he would never say this out loud, and he never would say this out loud, but he absolutely hated Phil. Well, I don't know that he hated Phil Jackson, the person, but he just rolled his eyes at Phil Jackson, the coach, because of the players that he coached. And prior to a press conference after a Knicks game, it was before the press conference started, Frank Isola, who you know, asked Jeff, he said, "Hey, have you read Phil's new book?" And Jeff said, "Yes, I actually have a copy of it right here." And he took a blank piece of paper and he wrote number 23 on it, and he handed it back to Frank. Can we be as, like, football's the ultimate team sport. I've said it for years, but can we be that reductive about this Chiefs team that it's 15 under center?
I don't think we can do that quite the same way in football because, like you said, it's kind of the ultimate team sport. He's the great eraser, but Andy Reid he dialed some things up yesterday he's never shown before, and then the Chiefs had the great fortune about 5 years ago, to hire a guy named Spagnuolo to be their defensive coordinator. And I'm not sure that even as great as Mahomes is, I'm not sure if it's not Spagnuolo coordinating that defense yesterday if Josh Allen doesn't move down the field and get him at least a field goal. There's something about Spagnuolo, might be the greatest coordinator the game's ever seen, but certainly in big games he rises to the occasion. But the blitz call at the end of that game was pretty impressive. So it's a lot of 15. I'm not sure it's as simple as what Jeff wrote on that piece of paper, but it's a lot of him for sure.
What's your gut tell you, Philly? And, you know, it's interesting with the Eagles. We always talk about if you're going to be great in the NFL, you have to have a great quarterback and a great head coach. And those are like the two areas people bring up as question marks with Philly, yet what Howie Roseman has built top to bottom on paper might be the best and deepest roster with the most talent in all of pro football. Your boys are getting 1.5 points, but it is early. What's your gut tell you?
It reminds me a lot of the first Super Bowl where they matched up a couple of years ago. Everybody was like, they liked Philly in that game because Philly had the best offensive and defensive lines in football. They're going to be able to run the ball down the throat of the Chiefs, and they're going to pressure Mahomes all over the place. They didn't really do either one of those things. Hurts was actually pretty good that day, but they also didn't have Saquon Barkley on that team to go with that offensive line. They had some good backs, Kenneth Gainwell, some other guys. I think it's pretty simple. I think it comes down to, can Kansas City slow down the run? And can they kind of keep some of those Philly defenders off of Mahomes? Vic Fangio is their defensive coordinator, and he actually had some success against Kansas City when he was in Denver. Didn't beat him a whole lot, but he had a really good success rate of slowing Mahomes down. So I like Kansas City. I think it's going to be a close game, kind of like the Buffalo game was. But if they can't stop Saquon in the running game, then they don't get a chance.
Josh Allen as Sean Kemp, Josh Allen as Charles Barkley, Josh Allen as Karl Malone or Patrick Ewing. But look, Bill, he's 28. But the problem is Mahomes is 29, but so where are you at on a Monday after yet another Josh Allen exit from the postseason, and whether or not you think he ever breaks through?
I think he's the second best quarterback in the NFL. I do. I don't think he played a bad game yesterday either. I mean, there was nothing wrong. I mean, he damn near completed that pass to Dalton Kincaid at the end. I think they have to do a good job keeping talent around him. I don't think they had the greatest talent around him this year, but he can put that Superman cape on, kind of like Mahomes can do from time to time. I think at some point in time, I think they're going to get a breakthrough at some point in time. Nobody wins forever. There'll be a down period. Even the Patriots had that. Chiefs will too. I like Josh Allen. I think he'll get a breakthrough. I don't know if he'll win a Super Bowl, but I think he'll get past Kansas City at some point.
Local angle. How do you think Dalton is digesting that? And it wasn't like a super simple catch, but a guy like that with hands like that, he's got to make that catch, and he knows that. How him? How do you think the past 24 hours have been for him?
He's got to be sick to death. You're right. I mean, it was not easy. It was kind of a moon ball that he came back for and slipped a little bit. But at the end of the day, it hit him in the hands, it hit him in the arms. So I'm sure he's going to be sick about that. Wasn't the reason they lost the game. Who knows what happens after that, but it was certainly a hugely pivotal play in that game. Other Utah note, though, I thought Cole Bishop, he got stiff-armed a couple of times. I thought Cole played pretty well overall in his first career start in the big – I mean, imagine that, making your first career start in the AFC Championship game against Mahomes at Arrowhead. Couldn't have been an easy sight, but I thought he did an okay job.
I must have just passed out for a moment because I almost asked you if you're cheering for Britton Covey to get a ring, and then I remembered who your team is. I'm like, let's just stay away from that question. All right, a little Utah football. We'll end with the latest on the Utes as far as the basketball side of things, but it was announced earlier today that Keenan Johnson is entering the transfer portal. 1 season here, transfer from Georgia Tech, season-ending knee injury. So who knows how healthy he was going to be anyway. But when you kind of look at the depth chart and who's coming back or what have you, it feels like he would have been slotted in to start, certainly in the mix. What does the news bring to your mind today? How do you react to Keenan Johnson hitting the transfer portal?
Little surprised, only because, like you said, the injury. It was going to be a long shot for him to be ready for camp or the beginning of the season, just based on the injury and when it occurred, because it occurred in season last year. So I don't have any, I'm not privy to any information. And as we've all grown to understand, nothing should shock us when it comes to the transfer portal anymore. Wish him the best. He seemed like a great kid. Interviewed him a couple of times last fall. I know they liked him an awful lot, but the knee injury is a big question mark. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they didn't, the second portal comes open in spring sometime. They've done a pretty good job in that second portal window getting some guys. So wouldn't surprise me at all there. They don't have a lot of proven names, but they've got some guys who played last year that are coming back. So I would guess they'd probably target somebody to fill his vacancy unless they feel like they've got somebody on the roster right now.
Let me follow up as that spring window will open, because it's hard to analyze the roster until, quite frankly, the week before the game these days, if we're being honest. But just give me the Riles take on potential areas of need that you think they'll look to address once the transfer portal reopens come spring.
Well, it'll be easier to tell once we see spring football just a little bit. But I think on offense, they've got to feel pretty good about things, about where they are. I think they reloaded they maintained the offensive line and kind of reloaded the wide receiver and running back room and the quarterback room. So I think they probably feel pretty good there. I think they like their depth at linebacker and its safety. I think they've, probably positioned to keep an eye on in the spring is overall depth at corner and probably along the defensive line a little bit too. But, those are two places where Utah always has great success, Spence, of developing guys and moving. They always seem to have just a ridiculous amount of depth at D-line and in the secondary. But I would say those are probably two places to keep an eye on, at least during spring football, to see how guys develop.
We had Jason Beck on the show. It was my first opportunity to interview him the week they were doing some media. And I just asked him point blank, I'm like, is Devin the guy? Is he, is Devin the starting quarterback? And he said yes, basically. I think he realized he was announcing something and then kind of said, well, Isaac this and quarterback room that. But and maybe that doesn't land as a surprise to you, Bill, but I just think this is a community right now of football fans that have a little PTSD when it comes to knowing who's going to start under center. So your reaction to Jason more or less saying that job is Devin's?
Well, I would be, I think when you bring a quarterback with you from a place, there's familiarity there, and there's nobody else in that quarterback room that touches the production that Devin Dampier has had either. So I don't think that would come, if that does indeed play out that way, as a big surprise because, one, the familiarity with the offense, two, the overall production, but three, he's dynamic, Spence, and he's got good game experience. And now he doesn't have it at this level. He did it in the Mountain West at New Mexico. But athleticism is athleticism, and he'll have better weapons and a better offensive line around him at Utah, too. So I would guess that would that would probably be the direction they're going in.
Yeah, like not too surprising, but it's just to hear something official. I think people enjoy that right now based off of the ambiguity week in and week out over the prior, few years. All right, so let's move over to here's what I wanted to ask you. So the narrative around Ohio State was they simply, $25 million, and they went and bought a national championship. You know what's interesting, Bill? When you look at the way that roster was constructed, the majority of their money went to players coming back. And
they retained their guys is really where they spent most of their money.
Yeah, and the transfer portal additions were the skill position guys. And it just made me think like, and maybe I'm stretching to make a local topic interesting for a 4-hour radio show, but that has to be something you fans should look at with some optimism because that's essentially, more or less, what Utah was able to do as far as their offensive line. So Ohio State retains the bulk of their lines and the bulk of the spine of the team, and then they add around and that's kind of what the Utes are doing, yes?
Yeah, completely agree. Utah, it feels like they targeted their offensive line, and they've got some studs up there to retain those guys. And then they went out in the portal and brought in some skilled guys around them. But that's exactly what Ohio State did. I think Ohio State, they signed that freshman receiver who is just ridiculous. Jeremiah Smith, goodness gracious. I mean, that kid did not look like – the closest thing I remember, you and I were at the Sugar Bowl together. Remember when we saw Julio Jones for Alabama in person, and we couldn't believe that this guy was an 18-year-old freshman? That's kind of how I felt when we saw Jeremiah Smith this year. And then the other big addition they made was the Caleb Downs. Was it Caleb Downs, the kid from the safety from Alabama, who was really kind of the kind of jack of all trades guy for their defense. So. No, I think that Ohio State certainly had a lot of money to spend, but they had a lot of talent in that program, and they retained them. They went out and grabbed Will Howard, a couple of pieces, but what they did was they said, we like the guys we have. Let's retain most of those guys that we can.
One more Ute football question before we end with some basketball. The way too early odds to win the national championship, and you can get odds on anything right now. You can get odds on a random hockey game, who's going to score first. You can get odds on what is Bill going to say to answer this question if you hurry right now. I mean, that's just the deal. But the two teams with the shortest odds in the Big 12 are Kansas State and Utah. Now, those odds are plus 25,000, but it's better than Arizona State. It's better than BYU. What does that say to you, if anything? Bill?
I know you've had Bill Connolly on the program before.
Yep.
And he had his S&P early stuff. He picked Utah to be the Big 12 favorite this year and make the playoff. I think what it says is, and he pointed this out, 5 of their losses were by 23 points. I mean, they played so many close games with a deficient offense. I think people now look at it and say they brought in a new offensive philosophy. They brought in a dynamic quarterback. They brought in some good skill guys around them. Defense was good last year. Probably would have looked even better with a little bit more offense. I think what it says is Utah wasn't far off last year. And if they are, if this quarterback comes in and this offensive philosophy comes in and works, that Utah's right back in the mix for things in the Big 12 and in the playoff. National championship's a long shot, man. We saw that this year. You got to get through your regular season, a conference championship game, and then play 3 or 4 more games. That is, it's a gauntlet. But I think the odds of Utah certainly getting to the college football playoff or competing for a Big 12 championship are great.
All right, moving over to some basketball before I set you loose. Before we get to the the last couple of games, which have not gone well at all, since I haven't been able to talk to you, I was at the Huntsman Center with Big Dave. We were looking down and trying to get your attention, a wave, as you were called in the game. And I got to say, Riles, I don't know, man. You're at all these games. For me, that was the first time in a number of years that I could have blinked and a 19-year-old puka shell wearing double polo, pop collar, bleached hair Spence Checketts was sitting there watching a Rick Majerus team play. Give me your thoughts on that atmosphere in that game before we get to, unfortunately, a couple of losses for the Utah basketball team.
Well, it was great to see it. It was, the 6th largest crowd in Huntsman Center history. I've been doing this 16 years, Spence, as voice of the Utes. I haven't seen many atmospheres that good. Couple of BYU games, that Wichita State game, couple of Arizona games, but it was great to have that atmosphere back again. And it was just, I love having the rivalry game twice a year now, being conference members with BYU. So I thought it was great. I thought the crowd did impact the game. I think some good crowds can do that, and it was nice to have it back. I think if Utah can sustain a little bit more consistency, that was the 3rd win in 3 games. That was among a winning streak. I think you're going to begin to see good crowds come back. Now, it's tougher to do in the Big 12 because the Big 12, there's really no nights off at home or on the road. But I thought that the atmosphere was great. And it probably took you back to your college days.
Yeah, no, it was fun, and it was a really good game. I was really impressed. All right, Houston, well, it didn't go well. And that's a team, Kelvin Sampson, that's a Final Four contending team. That's a national championship contending team. That's the 3rd best team in the country, according to Ken Palm. Wild game against your Jayhawks, by the way. But Houston was able to get that win. And then ultimately, Baylor comes into town, and Scott Drew's a national championship coach, and they get got. And Bill, it's just the same thing. When the competition improves, and Ezra in certain situations in space is a very capable offensive player, but he's not a perimeter ball in hand. That's why losing Davon hurt. And they just don't have that guy. And when the offense stalls and when the other team is selling out to stop Gabe, as you should do, people are cracking on Gabe for not making shots. They are doing everything they can to make sure he's contested. But that leaves space because of the gravity, and nobody seems to be able to take advantage of it outside of Ezra at times. So what have you seen that's gone wrong over the past couple of games for the Utes?
Well, the Houston game, let's just say what it is. That's a talent disparity right there. Houston's got dudes. They're the best team I've seen in person this year, and they didn't even have their best shooter, Emmanuel Sharp, on the floor that day. They're really good, and they're going to do that to a lot of people. They beat BYU by 31, so they're good. The Baylor game, I thought coming in, if Utah could be consistent offensively, they would have a chance. You're just going to have to be able to score in the Big 12. You're not going to be able to – not many teams are Houston where you're going to lock them down for 55 points a game. And you're right, Gabe is the top of everybody's scouting report. And they're running him off the ball. They're running 2 defenders at him. Other guys have to be able to step up and make shots. Ezra had 19 in that Baylor game. He was solid. But other guys have to be able to step up and kind of fill that void, and it didn't happen. They were good defensively for stretches in that game, but you're not going to be able to rely on your defense forever, even at home against teams that have guys that can score. And Baylor had the Edgecombe kid who's really good. Danny Ainge was up watching him. I mean, he's a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. He's really good. But they've got some other good players, too. And they didn't have Jeremy Roach in that game, who's the transfer from Duke leader. So The effort is there, but effort can only carry you so far, and they're just going to have to be a little bit better, especially on the offensive end in some of these games.
So before I set you loose, you've got Cincinnati rolling into the Huntsman Center tomorrow, then at Oklahoma State, and then on the road against Colorado. So really, you have 3 winnable games coming up. So I'll ask you, as we head into a stretch that will either make or break the season, what have you seen so far that you think is real and sustainable? What do they need to do to start stocking up wins again? And ultimately, their Achilles heel at this point is what?
Well, the Achilles heel right now against teams on their level has been inconsistent stretches on offense where they go cold. They went about 6 or 7 minutes against Baylor without making a field goal, and they've struggled at the foul line. So those are things that have to be fixed. But you're absolutely right, Spence. Cincinnati, they were a preseason top 25 team. They're 2-6 in league play. Oklahoma State, who they've beaten already this year, it's down in Stillwater, but they've shown some signs. But that's a winnable game. And then the game at home against Colorado, who's been, at least to this point, probably the worst team so far in the Big 12 this year. So, yeah, you're going to have stretches where you're playing the Baylors and the Houstons of the world, but then you're going to have those stretches. I think there's about 6 or 7 really good tournament teams in the Big 12 this year. And then the other 8 or 9 teams, you can throw them in a hat and pick a name out on a given day, and they can win. You know, West Virginia loses at home to UCF. UCF goes on the road, and they, you know, there's these are the games that you've got to win against those kind of teams that are on your level. So tomorrow night, Cincinnati, they've been in town for about 4 days. They got drilled pretty good by BYU on Saturday. Got to win that game at home. And if you win that game at home, that gives you a little momentum looking forward to Oklahoma State, who you've beaten already this year. If you can win those 2 games, you're then all of a sudden right back at 500 again, coming back home to play Colorado. So to me, it's finding that offensive consistency. And as you said, finding somebody that can help out, pick up the slack when Gabe's getting double and triple teamed.
On a day like today, do you look over at those headphones and say, man, I could crack a mic for 3 hours with my Chiefs in the Super Bowl again? Or are you enjoying your new gig where you don't have to worry about 9 non-guest segments a day?
I love my new gig, but I'm glad I got to come on with you today, and I'm glad you were kind enough to ask some Chiefs questions. I remember there was a day when Spence used to say, well, your Royals are a nice little story, but 2 or 3 of those guys will be playing for the Yankees in a few years. Well, I wish I could say the Jets were a nice little story, but I don't think any of those guys will be playing for the Chiefs anytime soon.
No, it's rough, man. I've made a lot of mistakes in life. At the top of the list might be every team I've ever cheered for, which is sad. All right, my friend. Great to hear your voice. Be well. We'll chat soon, okay?
Thanks, Spence. Talk to you soon.
Voice of the Utes. Get up to the Huntsman Center tomorrow to see Utah take on Cincinnati. Back-to-back losses, Houston, Baylor. Cincinnati's beatable. BYU just smoked them. That's an 8 o'clock tip time. Keep that in mind. You can see it on CBS Sports Network, and, of course, you can hear it right here on your home of the Utes. All right, new year, new you. Save some money. Budget wisely. You can save on your wireless, your internet, and your cable TV. All you have to do is dial 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Spence, thanks so much. I've been talking about this for the last few days about how Dish sends out these additional offers. They actually send out thousands of them, and they're very particular. They only go to the individual that gets the offer. But if you're like most of us, you probably throw away your junk mail. You never saw it. But here's the thing. Listen, if you're interested in saving money, if you are tired of the rate increases, another big rate increase with Fubo, we had one with YouTube TV. These 2 streaming apps are more expensive than Dish is right now. And it's mind-blowing because the product that Dish offers is far superior. Bigger DVR, auto-hops commercials, auto-record your favorite games. You get the streaming apps built in. You get access to your DVR content anywhere. Guys, there's only one way you want to do this. Call us up, take advantage of the deals. And listen, if you got one of these special offers in the mail with a fat gift card in it, and you threw it away, no worries, because I now have a tool where I can look that up and see if that offer was sent to you, and we can hook you up with it. On top of the 2-year price guarantee, credits for the next 2 years, you get that. And guys, you get the best price when you call us. Plus, we'll throw in dinner at JCW's. And guys, this Netflix offer, it's even better. It's like more than $431 in value. You get the ad-free version of Netflix for 2 devices, free for the next 2 years. And listen, if you have Netflix and you're rolling a cable or DirecTV or another bunch of streaming apps, guys, this is money in the bank for you. It is free money, $431 plus in your pocket by picking up the phone and just calling us and take advantage of the offer. Let us hook you up. Let us get you the best TV system. We'll give you a price guarantee and have you installed as early as next day. On top of that, JCW is on us. Call us up. Also, internet. We've got a half a dozen different internet providers. I got fiber in some areas at $35 a month. I've got Quantum Fiber at $45 a month. And this can possibly be the same fiber you're currently using. You just have to pay a different provider. Call us up and see what we can do for you. We want to save you money, get you the best deal out there, and have you installed as early as next day. Call now, 424-DISH. Stop overpaying, 801-424-3474.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros, 5 o'clock hour of the program. Gets rolling coming up on the other side. We'll get your Monday commute started right here on ESPN 700. All right, what's going on? It is drive time on a Monday afternoon. Drive at 5 time on this Monday afternoon / evening. It's been kind of a sunny and clear January day. The good news is we have made it to the final week of January. Good work, everybody. Bring it in. High fives. We're almost there. We have the third, this is the third fewest inches of snow we've had in Salt Lake in a number of years, according to our guy Chase from KUTV, who just sent out a tweet. Hopefully the snow in the mountains is taking care of all of our skiers and snowboarders up there. I'm sure we'll get plenty in February and March, but right now it is clear and sunny. Of course, chilly here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah on this Monday afternoon. Happy Monday to you. Hope you had a fantastic weekend full of sports. A lot of NBA, a lot of college basketball, a lot of NHL hockey. If you're watching the Utah Hockey Club in the midst of a pretty tough stretch for them, Utah Jazz are in action tonight. They're going to take on the Milwaukee Bucks. So the Jazz have lost 5 straight games. They have the second worst record in pro basketball, but as we've talked about, it is by design. We are just a few days away from the NBA trade deadlines coming your way on February the 6th. Jimmy Butler, according to reports, walked out of practice today in Miami, and he has been suspended again, this time indefinitely, at least for 5 games. So he's going to cost himself a lot of money. But ultimately, the question is, what does this mean for his availability? A lot of rumors surrounding the Phoenix Suns, who have acquired draft capital from the Utah Jazz in a trade that was made last week. Maybe they get in the mix. The last rumor I saw about the Jazz is John Collins heading to Sacramento. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But, of course, on the show today, most of the attention has been on pro football, on the NFL, with the conference championship weekend that is behind us. There was a little bit of Utah football news that dropped earlier as the University of Utah has lost another cornerback to the NCAA transfer portal. Cameron Calhoun, of course, is in Tuscaloosa to play for Alabama. And Keenan Johnson, who only started 1 game for the Utes, he went down with a season-ending knee injury, but he was a highly sought-after transfer a year ago. He transferred to the Utes from Georgia Tech, and he has now entered the transfer portal as well, announcing on his social media pages just a couple of hours ago. So Keenan Johnson entering the NCAA transfer portal. But once again, in the world of pro football, we have a Super Bowl rematch. It's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. And, of course, the Chiefs trying to make history. First team potentially to three-peat. Pat Riley. Every time I say three-peat, do I have to Venmo Pat Riley a couple of bucks? I'm not sure how that works. Pat Riley, once upon a time, he was able to copyright the term three-peat when he was the head coach of the Lakers. And apparently he's made a grip of money off of it. Not sure how that works. But anyway, Kansas City back-to-back Super Bowl winners. They took care of the Buffalo Bills. Super Bowl 59 features the Chiefs and the Eagles. Your opening line is Kansas City minus 1.5. Your over-under is 49.5. A rematch of Super Bowl 57 that saw a crazy Chiefs comeback to get that win 38-35. Of course, Kansas City beat San Francisco last year. 5th Super Bowl in their last 6 seasons. Andy Reid is now tied with Don Shula. This will be Andy's 6th Super Bowl appearance. He had 1 in Philly. He's now tied with Don Shula for 2nd all-time. The 5th Super Bowl for Patrick Mahomes, and he's now tied for 2nd all-time with John Elway. Of course, number 1 all-time is Tom Brady, and Tom holds most of the postseason records, as you would expect. So Chiefs-Eagles after Kansas City took care of Buffalo. And we were trying to come up with, because I've heard all of these talking heads on TV and radio podcasts today, try to come up with the most accurate Patrick Mahomes analogy. Whether it's sport to sport, whether it's crossing over to other sports as well. You know, Peyton Manning, and you're going to hear from Ben Solak coming up from ESPN in about 15 minutes. Peyton Manning went 0-6 against Tom Brady initially before he finally broke through. And Peyton, he did not have a great start to his pro football career as a postseason quarterback, but he figured it out at some point. And ultimately, that feels kind of apt as far as what Josh Allen is going through. Is Josh Allen Karl Malone and Patrick Mahomes Michael Jordan? Well, there's some meat on that bone. Now, the 1998 NBA Finals that saw the highest-rated basketball game in the history of people that track such things, and that, of course, was Michael Jordan's final game as an NBA player that was played here in Salt Lake City. We are the home. We are at Basketball City in a lot of ways. There's not another game that's even close to the amount of eyes that was on Michael Jordan's last game here in Salt Lake. And so those Jazz teams, like that was a 15-year project. That was a group, an organization, a club that built up a team over the course of 14, 15 years until they were finally ready to potentially win an NBA championship. Now, they were in the NBA Finals the year before, but 96, 97, the Bulls were the best team. They just were. And, you know, they were the favorite to beat the Jazz in the finals, which they did. But 97, 98 for Jazz fans will always be the year and the NBA Finals that just entirely got away. The Jazz were the best team in the NBA that year. They were. And so, you know, the reason why I don't love the Josh Allen as Karl Malone, for instance, because Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, they actually upset the Jazz in the finals. And it wasn't just a scenario where people around the Jazz thought, okay, this is our best chance to win a championship. We finally done it. John and Carl, 35, 36 years old. Jerry Sloan, legendary coach. We have a good team with depth. We have good wing defenders with Brian Russell and Shannon Anderson. We've got Jeff Hornacek as the number 3. We have some centers that are at least capable. And Chicago was starting like Luke Longley or whatever, so you didn't need a good center. But it wasn't just like, okay, this is the best chance for the Jazz to do it. Prior to the NBA Finals, the feeling around the team was this might be our only chance to get this done because John and Carl were getting older. Josh Allen's 28. He's going to have a lot of chances to get this done, get this thing done, finally break through. I do think he'll win a Super Bowl, if not multiple. But then after Jordan steals the ball from Malone, of course, as we all remember, he hits the shot. The Jazz had one more potential year in them, but it was the lockout-shortened year. They ran out of gas in the postseason. They lose to Portland. John gets hurt. Carl goes to Los Angeles. Boom. Jazz chances of winning a championship are done. And quite frankly, they have not been close since then. 1997, 1998 was the last time that there was a team in the city that had a real shot of winning the NBA championship. But much like Jordan, Mahomes changes his game and the way he wins games as he ages a little bit. Now he's 29. That's the crazy thing whenever we talk about Josh Allen at the age of 28. Like, yeah, he'll get it done. Well, the dude he can't beat is a year older than he is, right? So ultimately, that was the downfall of that iteration of the Jazz. But the reason the Jordan thing does kind of land is, and you know what? There's a little Carl in this too, because as Jordan aged, he changed the way he played. He was not the post-basketball offensive savant as an early player that he was later on in his 30s, where he dominated the game in a much different way. He could still get you. He could still dunk on you. But if you watch videos of younger Michael Jordan, he was an athletic freak. He was dunking on people's heads every night and relied on that athleticism to dominate in a way that he just didn't later on as he aged a little bit because, of course, Father Time undefeated. All of us, as you age, you're not the athlete you were when you were younger. So he had to find a different way to win. And honestly, that's when he became immortal, when he mixed the cerebral part of being just a dominant competitor and a great pro basketball player with his raw skill and athleticism and simply talent, which he had in spades. He also was the hardest worker in pro basketball. I mean, you got to remember, you know, the greats also put in the work. I know we're supposed to manifest whatever it is these days, but you got to show up and you got to put in work. And certainly Michael did that. But the reason why the Mahomes as Michael thing, in my opinion, works, I think that's the best analogy. I've heard Tiger on Sundays, which I like. I've heard Lionel Messi, of course, as the soccer side of things, as a guy you just couldn't beat and you can't get by. I like that too. But it is the Jordan thing because there are so many players in pro football right now that can't seem to get over that Eagles hump, or excuse me, the Chiefs hump. And it's the way he's aged, the way he's changed, the way he plays the position, where he does not need Tyreek Hill in his prime or Kelsey in his prime and throw for 425 and 5 touchdowns. He just brings whatever the game needs for them to win. And that's what Jordan started to do. And it's Sean Kemp, it's Gary Payton, it's Charles Barkley, it's Karl Malone, it's John Stockton, it's Patrick Ewing. I could keep going. All of those guys had rings ripped off their fingers by 23 for Chicago. And so many players are having rings ripped off their fingers by 15 from Kansas City. All right, we'll look back on these two games, look ahead to the Super Bowl with Ben Solak from ESPN. Are you you old enough to remember getting like Sports Illustrated as the magazine and reading like the magazine, not like SI.com? You old enough to have any memories of that?
Yeah, I got it, I think weekly or so until I was probably 12 or 13.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm like in that perfect age where I was alive to understand what the world was like before all of this, I don't even know, robots and AI and all the tech. I'm alive long enough to know what that's like, but not long enough to have like been able to enjoy it.
Would you know what to do if you needed to get cash and you didn't have your debit or credit card? Would you know how to do that?
Oh yeah. I
What would you do?
I have to write a check for one of my bills every month. So
You're still writing checks?
for my water bill every month, I write a check.
Who's your water company?
I know. It's
You write a check?
for a canal company, water shares on land. So,
I was
yes.
when one of my son was in town. He was with one of his friends, and we were at the house just watching a game. And I just thought I'd throw it at them. Hey, if you guys needed to go get $20 in cash, and you didn't have your debit card, you could not use Apple Pay, you simply just had to go get $20 in cash. What would you do? And they're like, well, we can't get it with our debit card. I'm like, no, you've lost your debit card. Zero clue. And these are smart young men.
Yeah.
Because once upon a time, you had to go fill out a withdrawal slip at the bank. You'd fill out all your information, hand it to the lady. She gives you $20. Anyway, we're not talking about anything financial literacy on the program. Sports Illustrated used to do this thing where they said the sign that the apocalypse is upon us, and then they'd have something disturbing or strange in the world of sports in that area. So we have some data today from what's called the Legal Sports Report. This is the amount wagered by Americans on sports for the calendar year 2024. For a little perspective, sports gambling became somewhat acceptable and legal in the year 2020. In 2019, $4 billion was wagered on sports by Americans. In 2020, with the advent of apps and some states that legalized it, that number went to $22 billion. In 2021, $58 billion wagered by Americans on sports. In 2022, $94 billion. 2023, $122 billion. In 2024, Americans wagered $143 billion on sports. Are we all aware that this doesn't end well?
I don't think that many people are, or they don't think that way. I'm not. Listen, and I've been kind of vocal about this. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I know that it's a huge part of our culture and sports right now. And I know that there is a push to not only normalize it, but like put it at the forefront of everything that we're doing. And I understand the reason that it's fun and addicting. But I don't really like the way that sports and sports gambling have had an effect on fans, on again, we can get into the money side. I don't think there's large scale rigging of games, but there have been moments where I look and I'm like, more so than in years past, like I don't think there's any way I could have seen that play and called it that way after a review, right? Like there's things that to me just raise my antenna a little bit more. The more and more we wade into the waters of sports gambling, and I'm with you. I don't think it ends well, and I think that there's not Pete Rose like moments, but stuff like it. At least there's going to be some scandals that are involving the sports gambling stuff, and yeah, I don't like the direction of it at all. But I don't think that that's going to be able to stand in the way of the almighty dollar, as you talk about.
According to CBS News, 65% of males in college have a FanDuel or a DraftKings account. 65%, man. All right, let's get out of here so we can watch pro golfers hit on a simulator. I will not be doing that. That's on television. Porter, what comes our way on a Tuesday edition of the show?
On a Tuesday edition of the program, we are talking some more NFL playoffs, talking some more basketball as well, maybe some RSL in there as well. Anthony Armstrong, the former Washington Commander wide receiver, now does a podcast on that squad. He'll join the program tomorrow, as will Sam Bruckhaus, our resident Tulane expert, but also been talking some NFL with us all season long. We'll catch up with our folks at RSL tomorrow as well, working through who that will be with their schedule ongoing this week. NBA Daily Assist with our friend Tim McMahon, and then since he's got a busy schedule later in the week, we're chatting with Chris Kamrani on a Tuesday.
A Tuesday CK. Wow.
There you go.
Okay. Well, that'll be fun, and that'll do it for our Monday show. Special thank you today to Ben Solak, Tom Haberstroh, Stevenson Sylvester, and Bill Riley. For any of the sound you may have missed from the show today, you can go to the website, which is ESPN700sports.com. Our mobile app is available for you to download for free. It's the ESPN 700 app. You can take us on the go. And then finally, for what we do in our space every afternoon for 4 hours, check out our podcast page, which is called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments, give us all the stars, and you will be eternally blessed. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Have a great Monday evening. We'll talk to you on a Tuesday show, and as always, you can catch it right here on ESPN 700.